Good morning, everyone. We are ready to reconvene. My name is Joe Rosenbaum. I'm the president of the California Board of Accountancy. Welcome to the second day of our May 16 and 17, 2024 CBA meeting. The CBA has provided the opportunity for the public to participate via the WebEx platform. When we take public comments, we will begin by taking public comment from those individuals attending the meeting at the Sacramento location in person. I will then ask the moderator to open up the lines for public comment. The public will be allotted up to 3 minutes for public comment. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Reed to establish a quorum.
Patricia Batchelor.
Here.
Nancy Corrigan.
Nancy Corrigan, present.
Nancy Dong.
Present.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines. Dan Jacobson.
Here.
Christian Latta.
Present.
Tony Lynn.
Here.
Joe Rosenbaum.
Here.
Katrina Salazar.
Present.
Teresa Thompson.
Here.
Yin Tu.
Here.
And Evangeline Ward.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to continue now with the President's report from yesterday, which is item number 2C. So even though we're here on Friday morning, if you can look at your agenda, it's item number 2C. So 2C is a discussion and possible action on activities and initiatives in California and nationally related to CPA pipeline, requirements for CPA licensure, CPA mobility, and changes to the Uniform Accountancy Act. You'll recall at our March meeting, the board directed staff to explore options for how California could take a larger and more active role in the pipeline discussions. Since then, staff have taken this direction and begun work on developing a licensure model, a licensure framework, intended to spur discussions among states on how to move forward with potential changes to the licensure model without compromising mobility, but instead modernizing it to make it more evergreen. To bring as much information to the board today as possible, staff began sharing this framework document with executive directors of other states, faculty, and some of our university partners throughout California, and various pipeline working groups for their feedback. Staff will share this feedback with you today to help guide you in our discussions. We're going to take a deep dive into the pipeline, and we're fortunate to have representatives from several organizations, both nationally and from California, to share information about the progress being made and the initiatives being proposed. The CPA pipeline is an important issue that we must work together collectively to address. With individuals retiring from the profession and fewer candidates entering the CPA pipeline, there are concerns around whether there will be enough CPAs to meet consumer demand. There are also issues surrounding DEI and trying to get more diversity into the pipeline. As we come to the table as regulators, we must understand how we fit into this pipeline discussion and the impact not having enough licensed professionals could have related to our consumer protection mission. Failure to meet consumer demand could have an adverse impact, resulting in increased costs and fees and unlicensed practice. We also need to remember that there are many factors impacting the CPA pipeline. Some of them, such as salary levels and work-life balance, are out of our control. As we think about solutions, I encourage us to think beyond solely education and beyond the numbers of 120 and 150. We need a holistic approach, a big picture approach, and more importantly, we need to remain focused on consumer protection. I'd like to thank everyone who may be viewing today's meeting on WebEx for joining us. We invite and look forward to hearing your comments, which will occur at the end of the full agenda item after all our guests and staff have made their presentations. Members of the board, I plan to pause between each of the items, each of the presentations, for you to ask any brief clarifying questions that you might have, but I would like to hold substantive discussion until after we complete all 5 components of this item. Public, again, you will have 3 minutes after the conclusion of the presentations in full. We're going to start off our first presentation under item 2C, which is the CBA Licensing Chief, Michelle Center, providing us with some background called Information and Data Regarding the CPA Pipeline. You have your presentation at 2C1 in your materials. Thank you, Ms. Center. You may begin.
Thank you, President Rosenbaum. Again, I am Michelle Center, Chief of the Licensing Division. The purpose of this, what I have been calling the mega item affectionately, is to provide the board with information as well as data on the CPA pipeline. Over the past several years, the number of people entering the accounting profession has decreased. To demonstrate the decline in individuals entering the CPA pipeline, we are providing an overview of data nationally and in California. This is data that has previously been presented to the board. The AICPA's 2023 Trends Report reveals a dramatic drop in accounting degree conferrals, with 7.8% fewer accounting bachelor's degrees and 6.4% fewer master's degrees in accounting awarded in 2023 compared to the prior year. 2022 saw the lowest number of new candidates sitting for the uniform CPA examination over the previous 16 years. The chart on page 2 of the item illustrates the decline in candidates passing the CPA exam. 2,362 California candidates passed the CPA exam. I do not need my PowerPoint for this. That's for a later item, sorry. The chart on page, sorry, I see all this flashing on the screen and it's you know, getting my attention. I'm hard to focus, I guess. So 2,362 California candidates passed the CPA exam in 2023, which is a decline of approximately 1,600 candidates compared to 2013. As you can see, this trend is reflected also on the national level. Fewer students completing accounting degrees means fewer candidates sitting for and passing the CPA exam, and thus fewer new CPA licensees. Even as the CPA pipeline shrinks, most accounting firms expect to hire new graduates at the same rate or higher, according to the 2023 Trends Report. The table on page 2 reveals 25% of the active licensee population in California is over the age of 60. Firms are anticipating retirements to create a need for a more robust CPA pipeline to continue replenishing their workforce. Staff have previously presented initiatives addressing the CPA pipeline, including the SURE CPA project recommendations, most recently discussed at the January board meeting. Later in this agenda item, a memorandum summarizing the SURE CPA initiatives will be presented, as well as 2 additional proposals to increase the scope of the SURE CPA project to include considerations of changes to the licensure requirements. The AICPA is also working on CPA pipeline initiatives. In May 2023, the AICPA finalized their pipeline acceleration plan and published an update in December 2023. This plan addresses action that can be taken to connect with prospective future CPAs prior to entering college and continues the connection throughout the pipeline. Attachment 2 summarizes these initiatives. AICPA's emphasis on maintaining rigor while streamlining the exam and licensure processes is a goal that staff strongly supports. CBA's authority is concentrated within the exam and licensure processes and is the area in which the most influence can be exerted by this board. This area will be discussed in more detail later in this item. CBA's active outreach program aligns with AICPA's initiatives to connect with college students. Regular outreach events conducted in cooperation with California colleges and universities encourage students to pursue accounting degrees and to enter the profession. And conversations with faculty assist staff in developing initiatives for the SURE CPA project. That concludes my presentation on Memo 1. President Rosenbaum, if you'd like to open it up for clarifying questions.
I would. So members, do we have any initial clarifying questions? for Ms. Center. Yes, Ms. Hines.
Thank you. So when you're looking at the demographics of this is a question I have over the course that we were thinking about over the course of this discussion. When you're looking at the demographics of the CPAs, where is there talk about where they work? Like what, because there's a lot of reference to firms and helping, prospective, students understand where, what it's like to work in firms, but how many CPAs actually work in firms? Because we think of the big firms, and there's a limited number of opportunities that would be in those. But what are the other places that they work, and how many of them work? Are they solo? Are they in companies? Like, I think so. It would be helpful to. You may not answer it just right now, but I think it would be helpful to talk about that context as well.
I think that's a great question as we look toward our initiatives. Unfortunately, we at the board do not have that data. It may be something that Cal CPA or one of the other organizations has and can share with us later during this item.
Just to add to what Ms. Hines just said, maybe, I don't know if it's possible, when licensees renew their license, maybe a question, I know when I renew mine, I ask the question of where do you work, private practice, public, to get data collected to see where are all the hygienists working at. That might be an option.
So right now we do try to restrict data collection to that information which is required. I understand maybe you're asking for the collection of volunteer information. I'm not sure if we can do that, but it is something that we can look into in terms of if they wanted to volunteer that information.
I would agree that those are very good questions to ask, and maybe there will be some other information shed later today, because if you indicate that firms are hiring at the same level and intend to, by definition, someone's going to be impacted more so than others. So, all right, thank you. Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you. In a conversation I had many years ago with a fellow who founded a lawyer's malpractice insurance company, he knew this information about where the lawyers worked, and he said in California, it's most of the lawyers are in small or sole practitioner firms. So maybe asking the insurance companies to see if they've got something. Just an idea.
Thank you. Any other clarifying questions? If not, let's move on to agenda item number 2. This is an update from the AICPA's National Pipeline Advisory Group via WebEx. And I believe that Mr. Michael Decker, who is Vice President of CPA Examination and Pipeline, and Marta Zanevsky, who's Vice President of State Regulatory and Legislative Affairs, will make that presentation. So please proceed.
Great. Thank you. Marta, I'll kick this off and then hand it to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. So this is largely an update from the CPA exam, all of the initiatives that are included within the pipeline acceleration plan that Michelle outlined, and then I can provide an update on some of the things that are happening with the National Pipeline Group, and then also some of the work that the AAA and other organizations are doing as well. So this slide shows we just launched CPA Evolution after a multi-year initiative of changing the exam, the greatest changes to the CPA exam since the exam was launched computerized back in 2004. So a tremendous effort by NASBA, the AICPA, Prometric, and state boards as well. And while volumes are lower this year compared to last year, that's natural given candidates rushed in 2023 in advance of the launch. I think the greatest thing to celebrate is that there were no operational issues to report. So again, kudos to NASBA, AICPA, Prometric, and everybody for coming together in that. This is for the first time ever, candidates have a choice in which section they decide to take. So you can see the distribution of disciplines, about 40% or so sat for bar in Q1, and that trend continues and looks like it'll continue through Q2. About 25% or less are sitting for information systems and controls, and about 40, somewhere between 30 and 40% are sitting for the tax section. So these were as expected. The scores have been released for disciplines, and they're expected to go out in advance of June 4th for the core, again, with no issues. We do suspect that candidates' choices will change over time as they see the pass rates. But again, we recommend sitting for the section that you're most familiar with, that you've studied, that perhaps you're working in that space. We don't recommend that students try to game the system by sitting for a section that they think might be easier than others. Let me share some things that are happening in the research world. In fact, I just got an email this morning from the Illinois Society. They updated their Decode the Decline pipeline report, so I'll be looking forward to reading that this weekend. This was a report by Burning Glass about talent disrupted, college graduates underemployment, and the way forward. And I think the key thing here is accounting and accounting majors and the CPA are less underemployed than many other majors. So again, good news, I think, for the accounting profession. The first job after graduation is critical. Underemployment rate is low. Underemployment is low if you've got an internship, if you've studied in a math intensive business field like finance or accounting. So again, all the good things that are in the pathway for CPA all support lower underemployment. So I'd recommend reading that research from Burning Glass. We also completed in late 2023, I think it was released around that same time, we interviewed and surveyed over 13 major universities across the country. And they were all increasing accounting enrollment. So the goal here was to understand best practices as to why their accounting enrollment was increasing and what they were doing to support their students and get them moving on towards the CPA. This report is available on our website. This is not about those 13 universities, but rather best practices. So if you're part of a university family and you're doing something that's not outlined in this report that's working, we'd love to hear from you. And if you are struggling, I encourage you to read the report. And if there's any way that we can help you in growing enrollments, we're here to help you in that regard as well. So this slide shows all the different initiatives that are underway. Michelle mentioned earlier the Pipeline Acceleration Plan that's here in pink, the National Pipeline Advisory Group, which was that independent group that just released their report earlier this week, and it'll be further discussed at AICPA Council next week. NASBA has their Professional Licensure Task Force, and I'll comment briefly. Actually, Denise Froming and I are working on the AAA Pipeline Symposium Stakeholder and Work Group. This is probably more about my PowerPoint skills than it is about the sort of shapes and colors and sizes of these circles. I think they're all overlapping in some way, shape, or form. I think they're all strong initiatives, and I think we should celebrate their work. And I don't mean to imply that, the gray is over in the corner. That's more about my PowerPoint skills than just they all are indeed working, with each other on similar things. From that AAA Stakeholder Symposium, they had a big meeting last September, and that effort largely hosted and supported by the AAA and NABA, but also supported by NASBA and Colleen Conrad and myself and others, including Denise. That group is focused on 4 major areas. 1 is branding, 2 is high school programming, 3 is community college, and the one thing I'm particularly attuned to is the intro to accounting and changing up the principles courses. Numerous studies have outlined that there's a challenge in the awareness and attractiveness of that intro to accounting course. And there's things that we can do there to support candidates, mentor candidates through their education process and reduce what's called DFW, reduce the number of students either earning a D, an F, or actually withdrawing. So the AAA continues to facilitate work groups in each of these 4 major areas. And as I mentioned, those organizations at the top are all stakeholders in this organization, working with this symposium group. And I think we're getting back together later this fall and continue to meet to drive these initiatives. So again, I think all very positive support. The pipeline, the AICPA's pipeline acceleration plan started with 8 initiatives, grew to 12 initiatives. Some are already way behind us, including the 18-month exam window that's now 30 months. Thanks to all the state boards that adopted that 30-month extension, as well as the credit relief initiative. All of those initiatives have helped candidates navigate the disruption of CPA evolution. So again, adding flexibility and time for candidates to complete the exam process and not reduce rigor is clearly a benefit and doesn't impact the rigor or validity of the exam. So very, very happy about that. Let me take you through some of the programs that are involved in this pipeline acceleration plan. Again, I see a lot of this as an and strategy. I know a number of firms are working with local universities around college initiatives to support the plus 30. I think that's great. We've got this national program called Experience, Learn, and Earn, or ELE. We launched it in January of 2024. With Tulane University. We've got a number of firms that are interested. In fact, we've got more firms interested than we do candidates that are tied to those firms. So we've got firms looking for young employees that they can support through this ELE program. We've got over 100 registered. I think there was 80 enrolled, and I think the retention rate or the re-enrollment rate from the fall to the spring was, I think it was over 75%, and we are heading into our summer session. So again, great news on ELE, continues to grow and continues to be supported by both NASBA, and the AICPA with Tulane. In the intro comments, clearly firm culture, firm demand, firm support, firm payment for students and candidates through the pipeline is key. We know the firms are in a war for talent, and anything they can do to change their business model, support sort of what today's students, what today's candidates are looking for in an employer, and support the CPA pathway for those candidates is strongly encouraged. The AICPA's PCPS program has a Transform Your Business Model tool set. It's available. And again, we continue to support the firms in their initiatives to support the pipeline. From a student and candidate and academic perspective, clearly our current chair, Corey Ramsey's out there promoting the profession. We've got folks at NCDI and our incoming chair. A lot of information's available at This Way to CPA, both from a student and an academic perspective, as well as our Discover Accounting site, which has videos and presentation material that everyone can clearly use when they're out in high schools and colleges supporting the profession. I know the National Pipeline Advisory Group has the Pipeline Pledge as well. So we're providing the resources as best we can to help all of you in your presentation out to future folks within the pipeline. Also, as part of the pipeline acceleration plan is our STEM program, and having both at a state and federal level have accounting and accounting courses be recognized under the STEM umbrella. This clearly helps funding and helps scholarships and helps awareness for students, and especially for parents of students as they look at future careers in accounting. And so there's a number of initiatives that we've got at again, both at a state and federal level to promote accounting within the T of technology of STEM. So again, information available on our website, aicpa-cema.com /STEM. 529 plans is something new. Again, we're trying to promote this at the federal level, where existing 529 funds can be used to cover not only CPA licensure, but any licensure and preparation costs to support candidates through the pipeline. And they can use those funds to help in either exam fees or any kind of licensure and or preparation fees, including review courses. So a lot of very strong support for this, and we'll continue to definitely push this through the House. The foundation, so the AICPA Foundation is a not-for-profit organization where we are promoting support for both students and candidates that are financially in need as they complete their journey into the CPA profession, or if they are in the CPA profession and wish to secure their PhD, we will support them as well. So these scholarships go for education at both the bachelor's and master's level, and it also includes exam fees to help candidates through the pipeline. We ensure that they are in financial need, and we awarded over $1.6 million in scholarships last year. We're hoping to do the same this year. And I think it was about 61 or 62% of those scholarships were awarded to students from a diverse background, a culturally diverse background. So we continue in our mission there. We are working with state societies on growing the foundation. We are working with different firms and organizations, and potentially looking at banks through the Community Reinvestment Act to help drive funding for the foundation and then back into the pipeline. Quickly on the National Pipeline Advisory Group, I hope you have all seen the report that was generated earlier this week. Again, this group has been involved in working together. It's an independent group led by Convergence Coaching. They've been in the organization since and working since July. I see Kathy's face pop up. So she's been part of that National Pipeline Group. Happy to have her. Clearly a ton of surveying, a ton of polling, and they've come out with these 5 themes. Tell a more compelling story about what we do and our impact, the need to address the cost and time of education, making the academic experience more engaging. And I think that goes back to the AAA's work with Intro to Accounting and eliminating the DFW of students. Again, not lowering rigor, but rather providing better support and flexibility for candidates. And then again, going back to the PCPS work that AICPA is doing, but enhancing employee experience with evolving business models, culture, and greater support for candidates in the pipeline. So I've updated this slide. Again, they were doing a ton of work earlier this year in finishing up some research, finishing up the surveys. The draft report was released earlier this week on the 14th. That's available. There's an executive summary as well. It'll be discussed more at council next week. And then I think there's the final report that'll come out probably June, July timeframe that will include all of the survey data that was secured most recently through all of our research there. So Again, we'll probably reconvene and figure out how to bring all the stakeholders back together with a number of recommendations that were made by multiple stakeholders. We'll work to try to convene those groups and see how best those things can be implemented. So I know I spoke fast, but in conclusion, there's a ton of work that's happening at the AICPA around the exam and monitoring the adoption and evolution of, obviously CPA evolution. We're continuing to execute about all those things that we've outlined in the pipeline acceleration plan. We now have the independent National Pipeline Advisory Group report that not only the AICPA, but other major stakeholders need to look at. It's a really strong thought piece and a lot of really good recommendations. So each of the stakeholders need to look at that to see where they might implement some enhancements. Still looking at numerous student and candidate member value propositions, and we're always looking at how we can better improve their engagement, high school, community college, and again, keeping those candidates in the pipeline so they can complete the licensure process. So again, I know I spoke fast, but I think that's it. There's my email if you have any questions. And I guess I'll defer to the chair if there's any other questions I might be able to answer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Decker. Board members, do we have any clarifying questions at this point? Ms. Hines.
I have one more for us. Is our intention in having this discussion to educate us to what's happening and then try to generate some additional feedback, or like is this a place for brainstorming, or is this for feedback to be given, or is this a place for us to get information and then sort of sit with it? Like, what's the intention for what are our goals coming out of the presentations today?
Right now, the presentations are educational.
Okay.
At the end of these presentations, we'll have discussion, and one thought would be whether we direct staff to continue to look at some of the framework that we're currently on.
If we have questions about each of the individual presentations, should we direct them to the folks that are presenting, or are they going to stick around like Mr. Decker or others, or if we have other thoughts or questions about, the information that's presented? I mean, I just want to make sure I'm not taking up our time.
First and foremost, if you have any questions about what was presented at the time, let's ask them real time. But let me ask Mr. Decker, are you going to remain throughout the morning session?
Yep, I'll be here.
Okay, great. Yes.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Katrina Salazar. My question is, do we know how many California employers are currently enrolled in the ELE program? I was thrilled to hear there were 100. I believe that's what you mentioned. So I'm just curious if that data is available, or if not, if it can be requested. Thank you.
I don't know, but I can find out. And I also forgot to mention a very important piece about Katrina, as she's our incoming chair of the Board of Examiners. So sorry, Katrina, but yes, I'll see if I can find that information and share that with you.
Thank you, and we're very proud of Katrina as well. There was one other clarifying question from the last presentation, and that is, does the AICPA have any metrics on graduates going to the big firms versus the second tier versus smaller firms?
I don't believe we do. Some of that would be in the trends report or through any kind of surveying we would do of firms. We wouldn't have that through the exam data because we do blind scoring. We don't know who the candidates are. We would have to survey the firms to see who they're hiring or how many CPAs are currently employed through them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lada.
Thank you, President Rosenbaum. And thank you for your presentation, Mr. Decker. I have a few clarifying questions. You mentioned that in regards to the firm culture topic, do we have any data or feedback from the firms on how far along they are with applying those best practices? And is there any way for us to know if those changes are happening?
I don't know that were able to measure that other than through anecdotal kind of information. Again, all the firm visits that we do and or the engagement we have with firms, the ones that are succeeding and growing and securing the staff they need are looking at, the various work-life balance, culture changes, financial support, whether it's with starting salaries or flexibility in hiring, and in supporting the CPA pathway. I don't know that we've got exact metrics on that, just that the ones that seem to be doing well and not winning the war on talent, but maybe less impacted by that, are looking at their own flexibility and looking at their own kind of initiatives to shift it to what today's generation and graduates are looking for.
Thank you. Also along the same lines of that topic, in terms of best practices, has there been a discussion in regards to supporting employees' mental health or mental wellness? I know mental health is becoming a overall society concern more than it has in the past, so I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I don't know that I could speak specifically to mental health other than what we're hearing from candidates and young employees is they need to feel supported. And it's the concept of sort of firm demand, pressures at work, pressures of wanting to be a CPA and the exam and then studying, and just the environmental stress that they have being sort of young professionals. Maybe they want to start a family, maybe they want to move out of their parents' house, maybe they want to buy a house, maybe they, sort of the stresses and pressures that they all have at that age, as they start to build their career. I don't know specifically around sort of mental issues other than just the pressures and things just of that generation at that time. But again, we can sort of think about that and look at that in future surveys and research.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is in regards to the AICPA Foundation. How are students and candidates informed of these scholarship opportunities? How are we getting the word out on that?
Yeah, we're all over LinkedIn. We're all over social media. It's on our website around the AICPA Foundation. Again, working with firms, both Big Four, major firm, G400, in getting their support for funding. And then we're looking to work more closely with all the state societies, potentially state boards as well. And then with colleges and universities, and now with banks around, essentially generating more fundraising for scholarships and then promoting more. Right now, I'm sort of unhappy to report we've got more willing and able and qualified scholarship recipients than we do funding. So we need to turn our focus more to raising more money, because we definitely have more people that we could support than we can.
Okay, thank you. That was all.
Do we have any other clarifying questions? Yes, Nancy.
Thanks so much for the presentation. Just one question about pathways as relates to population movements. Would you happen to have any data, or have you tracked the number of candidates sitting for CPA exams, or where they're heading on a regional basis? So perhaps if more younger professionals are moving outside of California or New York, perhaps they're going to places like Georgia, Tennessee, Idaho, et cetera. Do you have any information on that? And are there unusual or interesting trends you want to point out?
So we have not completed that analysis around sort of where the candidates are coming from. We could do that, although it would only be where candidates are testing, and where they test may be different than where they apply for licensure. we'd have to ask either NASBA or the individual state boards to take a look at their historical volumes around applications. But we could take a look at where they're testing to see if, again, if they're testing either near their home or work, and if they, assuming they intend to stay in that space, in that geographic area, we could look at that.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? If not, let's move on to item C3 on the agenda, which is an update from the NASBA, the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy's Professional Licensure Task Force. And for this, I'd like to welcome Stephanie Saunders, CPA, Chair of the NASBA Board of Directors, and Dan Dustin, CPA, currently NASBA Vice President of State Board Relations.
Thank you, President Rosenbaum. I will start this program out first by thanking all of you for inviting NASBA's Professional Licensure Task Force to give you an update. This is a very important issue that we all face as regulators. As President Rosenbaum mentioned earlier, we cannot control salaries or the work-life balances that most of us believe are the number one and number two barriers to entry into our profession. We certainly know the cost of education is skyrocketing, and our candidates do not necessarily see the value as becoming a CPA commensurate with the education. So what we can do as regulators, who it's our job to protect the public, and we certainly need to have CPAs in our states to help protect that public. I announced at our annual meeting that NASBA would establish a professional licensure task force that included representatives of the AICPA, state boards, and state societies. And I want to share that task force charge with you, because this is what we can do in our states in relation with the Uniform Accountancy Act. So I do believe that 150, a master's program plus 1 year of experience, is a valuable resource to our students and candidates. But I also know not everyone can afford that. So therefore, the task force charge is to consider new concepts for CPA licensure that may be included in the Uniform Accountancy Act to update the current licensure model. I'm going to see if I can do this. Dan, do I have? Yeah, I guess I do. So let's go to the concept exposure that actually was presented. And there it is. Right after we had our first meetings in November and December of this task force, we came out with this question, and it was, do you believe the Professional Licensure Task Force should continue to focus its discussions on an equivalent path to licensure that defines a structured professional program that would qualify an individual for licensure as a CPA? So can we expand that licensure model? And it has to be in our mind and the task force mind to be an equivalent model to what we already have to protect substantial equivalency and mobility, which I know is first and foremost in the front of our minds as protection. So I can tell you through March 31st, which was our deadline, with the exception of academia, the majority of the stakeholders said continue on with this concept. And again, realize that we don't have the devil in the details. It's not fully baked. So while Dan and I presented some of what you're seeing in this slideshow to the Executive Directors Conference in March in Nashville, that included our EDs as well as some state society execs, that we were told that even though they like the concept to go forward with it, until they really see what it's all about, they're not going to rubber stamp it. And we're not expecting that. And in fact, when we gave the presentation at the EDs, we did get pushback on what we called a sample model. So we were trying to give people a little bit more devil in the details, but of course, like anything, they saw complexity in it. So we've gone back to the drawing board. We will be working with a new working group that I will speak to a little bit later on, so that we can see what we can do to try to get to that equivalent model. I have to be honest with you, my personal opinion and that of the task force at this point is that going back to 120 or a bachelor's with a concentration in accounting plus 2 years of general experience with no parameters is not equivalent. So we need to work together, AICPA, NASBA, other stakeholders, state boards, state societies, to come up with something that maintains quality in our profession. We certainly have worked well as trusted advisors, and some of the questions you all have asked are just amazing, and what I would like to see us going forward, that we do have that data. So with that, I want to go to the next slide, if I can do this. There we go. And I'm going to turn this over to Dan. I do want to say one thing. I have to thank Dominic and your board for asking so many questions when that concept exposure came out. And I will share with you that that was part of our presentation at the executive directors meeting. If you still have questions or we want to revisit those, we can do that while we're here today. Thank you. And Dan, take it over.
Stephanie. Good morning, everybody. We wanted to take a step back and tell you about the principles and the concepts and some of the thought process that went behind what we did as we developed the structured professional program over the last few months. So this first slide is really the principles that the group put together. They wanted to establish an equivalent pathway in the UAA. And we felt that that was very important because the way the UAA Section 23 substantial equivalency is written today, if the Uniform Accountancy Act has a definition of other equivalent pathways, then it limits the impact on mobility and substantial equivalency. Analysis suggests there are 10 jurisdictions right now that tie mobility to having 150 hours of education. And so they would be the ones that would be most impacted by any change without going back to legislatures and having things changed. We also, obviously, the boards of accountancy are responsible for protecting the public interest. We also adopted some principles that were part of the CP evolution model. We wanted to be cost effective, and Mike Decker talked earlier about the Experience, Earn, and Learn program. That's a joint program of NASBA and AICPA, and how we wanted to be cost effective in that as well. We wanted to maintain rigor, and you heard about rigor earlier. Rigor is a trick word for some people, and we're really focusing on the minimum competencies that a newly licensed CPA has. And as Stephanie mentioned, we don't believe that 2 years of general experience that's undefined in any way is meaningful experience to protect the public interest. If you were to go back in time and look at what happened before the introduction of the 150-hour rule, many jurisdictions required that experience to be earned in a public accounting firm, and in some instances had to be earned providing attestation services. The profession has evolved. I don't think putting everybody through those keyholes works today, but we certainly want to have some sort of guardrail by which we can judge whether somebody has met the minimum competencies. We also wanted to make sure that it was available to all firms and businesses of all sizes. Many of the experiential learning models today are attributed to 1 or 2 firms and their employees. We wanted something that was more along the lines of what the Experience, Learn, and Earn program is, that any organization could participate in the program and their employees could participate in the program. We also wanted to find a minimum time frame to complete the program, because we're saying it's a 2-year program, so it would be a minimum of 2 years. And it establishes an evaluation process to determine whether the individual has met the minimum requirements for licensure. Some of the concepts we included in the Structured Professional Program, or SPP, we wanted to focus on higher order skills. Many times we continue to hear that even though the changes that were made to the education model back in 2008 included things like soft skills, that is not necessarily translated into great communication skills amongst graduates even today. So we wanted to make sure there was some higher order skills included that when we defined the competencies. And the competencies would be those competencies or those learning objectives that would need to be met in order for somebody to become licensed. We also thought that the program had to be applicable both to public accounting firms and inclusive of business, industry, and government. One of the questions earlier was the demographics. And generally, demographics are that it's about a 50-50, maybe a little different mix between CPAs in public accounting and CPAs in business and industry and government. So we wanted to make sure that employers of all types could participate in this program. Again, we talked about the length of the program being 2 years, but when we talked to the task force, they said, well, should that be equated to total hours or years? And that's one of the things that the task force continues to talk about. Again, we talked about it being a 2-year program, counting both toward the education component, because there is going to be an experiential learning piece to that, as well as experience. So the individuals participating in the program would be learning on the job through what they're doing. And that would be a component that's very important. Not only would they be applying the theory that they learned in their undergraduate studies, but they will also be applying what they learned on the job. We'd also want to have evidence of and a measurement of the competencies that they are earning. And we wanted verification and sign off by a CPA supervisor that the program was completed. So I'll talk a little bit about outreach and collaboration we've had to date. We started talking with board accountancy members and executive directors. We actually held 2 webinars in January and March to talk about where we were along the way to developing some of these concepts and principles. We also met with the AACSB, which is one of the leading or the leading accreditation bodies in the United States with respect to education. They seemed interested in the program and did not really have any input right now, but we're curious to learn more as we develop this program. We also met with representatives from the State Society Government Relations staff, including Jason Fox, who may be in the room with you today from Cal CPA, to share our thoughts and to solicit input from them. NASBA has a State Society Relations Committee, which is made up of 8 state society execs from around the country. We shared our thoughts and ideas with them and continue to collaborate with them on important input as we move this forward. And then finally, you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, the AACPA's National Pipeline Advisory Group. The Substantial Equivalency Work Group was part of that. I actually participated on NPAG and with that group. And we continue to make sure that we have communication in both directions between the organizations, between the groups, and we're actually in the process of establishing a joint work group. So Stephanie, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about that work group.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, one of the things that we did as a group is we went through a couple different competency models, if you will, and questions. We did that both at the Professional Licensure Task Force as well as the NPEG SE group. And after we had done that, we had a joint meeting together that went very, very well to hear what NPEG SE group was looking at compared to what we were looking at. And we thought that they were definitely aligned and that we could work together to go forward with this initiative. So that joint work group has been established and has met once. We have our second meeting coming up, I believe, next week or right after the spring council meeting. I can tell you we have included Jason Fox from Cal CPA, along with AAA Mark Beasley, who's the incoming chair, I believe. And he at this first meeting, I'm not going to say we were totally aligned, but one of the questions I asked at the end of that meeting, and I said I would not take names down, was, did they feel that 150 plus 1 was equivalent to 120 plus 2 with no parameters? And not one person raised their hand. So I still think whatever we call SPP, that there is a need for quality, a quality program that I think we all can come together and work together, collaborative. AICPA, NASBA, state society, state boards, and the education community, so that we come up with a program that would be off a transcript that would be equivalent to the plus 30 hours. So that is what this joint work group is doing. We're going to continue to develop the process and the competencies for licensure. We're probably going to work on national standards and or guidelines for an SPP, working on the UAA language, and we will be reporting back to both the Professional Licensure Task Force as well as the BOA, the different boards of accountancy, AICPA, NPEG, SE group, and so on. So it is a very important item on this initiative to continue to go forward with it. So watch out. We're going to keep on explaining to people. We do believe at our regional meetings that we will have some more quote unquote meat on the bones or devil in the details that the state boards can weigh in on. So
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bring it back.
Okay, thank you. We're going to show you a bit of a high-level model, that process that we were thinking of, and what's been shared historically with the groups we've been speaking with. So the sample process really at its core has the competencies that we've talked about. And this has probably been the biggest stumbling block of trying to present this to people. Both at the January meeting, at the March, I should say the January webinar, the March webinar, and the Executive Directors Conference, many people didn't look at the process itself, but instead focused on the straw man or the example we gave. And at that time, we used the CPA evolution model curriculum to demonstrate how we might develop competencies that would be judged in the process. But the process would be individuals would register to participate in the structured professional program through a uniform automatic tracking system. The individual would choose the competencies and self-assess, and a CPA supervisor would approve. So we recognize that the competencies have to be refined, whether an individual is working in public accounting, business, industry, or government, and whether they're doing things like attestation or tax or consulting. So it's got to be broad-based competencies that the individual could choose from, but they would certainly have to be flexible enough to accommodate those who work in different areas. The CPA supervisor would register and link to the individual, and then there'd be periodic assessments of the competencies earned, both by the individual while they're self-assessing their learning and their competencies, and by the CPA supervisor. And they would do that until the competencies are met within the program. Once the competencies are met and the CPA supervisor signs off, the Board of Accountancy and/or CPACE, and CPACE is a subsidiary unit of NASBA that processes applications for 36 boards around the country, they would be notified of completion. And what we envision is that some type of documentation would automatically be sent to the boards of accountancy or to CPACE, signifying that both the individual and the CPA supervisor at the employer recognize that the employee has now met the minimum competencies for licensure. So in some ways, it's like getting another piece of electronic document, such as a transcript or something else. So very streamlined for everyone. The one thing I would say, again, is don't get tied down to the model that has been shown previously. I'll tell you, we've looked at things like Oregon rules on experience, which are rather lengthy. We looked at Nevada rules. We looked at early learning programs like Thomson Reuters Audit Watch and Thomson Reuters Tax Watch and AICPA staff training modules. And just as folks got hung up on CPA evolution model curriculum being used, folks were concerned that we're suggesting that CPE courses that are used as training would be the model, and that's not the case at all. We continue to work on the competencies. We're working with the AICPA on developing things, and that joint task force as well is working on different options to look at with respect to the competencies. So digging a little deeper, NASBA has committed to creating the uniform automatic tracking system, so there'd be no cost to the individual or the firms to participate. That tracking system would house the competencies, and the competencies would need to evolve as the profession evolves. The individual would have applied for the CPA exam, and that's important because many states today allow candidates to sit at 120, including their accounting hours. So by that assessment already being done, they're qualifying for the CPA exam, and that means they could enter very efficiently into the SPP program. And you can see that next bullet says individual obtains a unique identifier through the exam application process. Every candidate has that unique identifier. So as part of the registration process, they could register with that unique identifier. We envision the system could then check with the National Candidate Database to verify it is the right person. And that person could then register to participate in the program. The CPA supervisor could also register to use the tracking system. And that individual could link then to, that supervisor could then link to the individual. And we also envision that we would be able to link this tracking system to CPA Verify or the Accounting Licensee Database, where we could verify that the CPA is licensed in good standing in a jurisdiction in order to sign off on the competencies that are being attained by the individual. So with that, I want to thank you, both of us want to thank you for participating on your meeting today. I will tell you, we recently became aware of some big state meetings of jurisdictions who represent about 2/3 of the licensees in the country. And I throw a little caution out there about that type of solution because solutions that are created in a vacuum are often destined to failure. And it's only through collaboration, and I think you've heard the word working together and collaboration mentioned many times today. It's only through collaboration that appropriate solutions can be found. I've shared many times that NASBA views the boards of accountancy similar to the United States Senate. One state, one jurisdiction is one vote. That we need to be inclusive of all jurisdictions, all boards of accountancy when we find that solution. Similarly, I've heard of discussions of forming regional PACs to find solutions within their region. Again, the CPA license provides an uninhibited practice nationally across state lines. The mantra has always been no notice, no fee, no escape. Now's not the time to exclude parties from the discussion, but rather it's time for all parties to work collaboratively to find an appropriate solution. Again, I thank you for allowing Stephanie and me the time to share our thoughts with you today, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Thank you both, Ms. Saunders and Mr. Dustin. Okay, members, do we have any clarifying questions? First, Ms. Tu.
Thank you, Mr. President Rosenbaum. Again, this is Yen Tu, and I have a clarifying question regarding the CPA supervisor registering on the automatic tracking system. Would they then have with the student, it's obviously, it's the application for taking the exam. So the CPA supervisor would also need to have a identifier on the system, I'm assuming. And that's all voluntary on their part.
So right now, almost all jurisdictions, I believe there's one that doesn't, all jurisdictions participate in the Accounting Licensee Database, and they provide data to the ALD, the acronym. And so they have a unique identifier that is associated with them. And so we would be able to link them with that unique identifier based on how they register in the tracking system.
Ms. Hines?
Thank you. I have a kind of a follow-up question on the CPA supervisor. Are there any going to be like standards regarding who can be a supervisor? Or, is there going to be some kind of certification or, to track to make sure that the supervisor is actually competent or has a certain level of competence?
Stephanie, you want to take that one?
I'll do that one. It's interesting, at our board meeting when we were discussing this, I can tell you that our president at the time, Ken Bishop, when as regulators, we tend to see some of the bad players in our profession, that the majority of our profession are excellent at their job as CPAs, and we allow those CPAs to sign off on audit reports. So yes, to answer your question, there would be minimum requirements for that CPA supervisor. And that would be something that, could be an enforcement action if that CPA supervisor is not doing what they should be doing to help that candidate along. Again, we see that can be a risk also to that person. So we've got to be very, very careful on how we set those standards and guidelines. The example we had earlier that people have pushed back on was something that I used myself as a supervisor for somebody coming into my firm to become a tax professional, but I did not have the money to go for that 5th year or that extra 30 hours. There is so much knowledge that I have over 40 plus years. In fact, it was my 50th tax season this past year, that we can help those candidates learn on the job by applying what they've learned in school to what we do in the profession. So I can see that there is a good, strong possibility that we would have great supervisors. We've also had the question, if you go from firm to firm, is that going to be a problem? We would not see that. That would just be something that could be transferred. Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, Stephanie. One of that question came up actually amongst the group, and we were talking about whether there had to be a minimum level of experience. Should the individual have 2 years of experience? I'll tell you, I read a lot of state laws and rules, and I just came across one in the last few days where a jurisdiction had a 5-year minimum of experience as a licensed CPA in order to sign off on someone else's experience. So I think that's one of those things that would be in the standards of guidelines. The other thing that was encouraging, we've spoken with society execs around the country, and some have suggested that this might be an opportunity for them to do training as well, that they could create some courses that would provide some background for individuals who are going to serve as CPA supervisors to give them some confidence in providing that role within the program.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Jacobson.
Thank you. Are you gathering knowledge, data, that sort of information that will enable you to set timelines for or time goals for the various projects that you're undergoing and other goals?
Stephanie,
Yes,
you want to
sir.
grab that one?
Yes, sir. I can tell you that originally what we call my aggressive timeline, which, remember, I'm a tax CPA, so I'm used to dealing with deadlines. So my initial was to try to get at least the part that needed to get into the Uniform Accountancy Act done by October of this year. But like all good tax accountants, that's what you have extensions for. So I doubt that we're going to get that language in the UAA by October, but I would hope we would have that language exposed by October so that all the legislators out there, the legislatures that have to do some work on this to bring it into their states, would have time. Now, as far as the program is concerned, that's going to be ongoing. And I would tend to think it's going to be as evergreen as can be, but it will also stay up with the time. So it's going to be something that you would have groups similar to the CPE groups that we have currently that set standards for CPEs. That's a joint group with AICPA and NASBA. I tend to think we would use the same. Realize that we do have a time frame, that if in fact this gets into the UAA and we can get this program available by sometime mid-2025, we would have 2 years for those people, the new candidates who cannot be in their fifth year or their 30 plus, that they could get in this program. It would take 2 years. This will give times for the different states to be able to include what they need to include in their statutes and regs. So we do have a timeline, but it has to be flexible. But Dan, I'll let you take some more if I've missed something on that.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. We're really hoping to have UA language by the fall so that folks can look at it, comment on it, and go through that exposure process before we get to busy season in 2025, because we know boards don't meet often during that time period, and we don't want to delay this another year. So we're really looking to have something done in the near term.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Thompson.
Hi, this is Teresa Thompson. Are you able to share some of the feedback or concerns that were raised in reviewing 120 units plus 2 years as compared to 150 units and 1 year of experience?
Go ahead, Dan.
A lot of it was based on feedback we received either at questions during our webinars or at the Executive Directors Conference. We could probably go back through the responses to our concept exposure to see what we had there. I would suggest that the comments we received at the Executive Directors Conference was that it was too complicated. And I think that was mainly driven because the model we showed, again, it was a straw man. It was a model that was developed using the CP Evolution model curriculum. And that included, I think, 69 various modules and 866 learning objectives. And that was really to provide an opportunity to, again, address individuals who are working both in public accounting and business and industry. But the tripping point was that I think people either thought they needed to take all the modules or all the learning objectives, and we hadn't got that far to even define that. And some folks were associating that model with education and believing, that it had to be psychometrically sound. And that isn't the process. That I understand that's a process with the exam, but in this case, we didn't believe that was that was the intent of the model. And that's why, again, it was a model to use as an example. And I would just also share with you that with every webinar, with every presentation, we get people who tell us they like what they see, but then they drill down to the next level and expect more answers. And we continue to work on this, and we just don't have those answers because we continue to work and better define what we're doing.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Along the lines of the 120 versus 150, I know you both have expressed your personal, your personal belief that 150 is the appropriate number. Question that I had is, going back to the slide on the concept exposure, the question was, do you believe that the professional licensure task force should continue to focus discussions on the SPP? And the question that I have is, was there a similar question asked about whether or not those who were surveyed believe that we ought to revisit the 150 versus 120 and add an extra year of experience?
We did not. We had just that one question because the task force had been established in late November, mid-November. And so we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive of the input of the boards of accountancy before we went too far down developing a pathway based on 120 hours of education. So I guess by default, Chair Rosenbaum, we are suggesting that there are equivalent pathways that could be developed with 120 in 2 years of defined competencies, not just broad-based, no parameters around the experience.
And to follow up on that, I can tell you that when we talked about, we've even talked about not using numbers these days. We're seeing that the education models are even changing. So, you know, there may be some changing to a master's or +1 or a bachelor's plus ELE +1, or, you know, there's a couple different things we're thinking of, including in UAA, that is happening and is allowed. Right now, and you know it as well as I do, we are very fortunate. We are the gold standard of being able to be mobile in the United States and the territories, the 55 jurisdictions. I would hate to see, after the 20 years it took us to get there, for us to have all the different states go in all different directions and mobility breaks. This task force was charged with trying to expand that licensure model to be included in the UAA so that we could maintain substantial equivalency and mobility. So that was why that 120 +2 with no parameters was really not on the table.
Yeah, we had concern, and you know, it's hard to give you examples, you know, but one I use often is that if you're a bookkeeper for car washes and you're counting quarters or keeping the books in a car wash, is that sufficient competent experience for 2 years to qualify you as a CPA? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I think that's where we get to the point of where we believe that there are parameters and minimum competencies that may be needed. Maybe it's bookkeeping function. You know, is somebody who's doing bookkeeping for 2 years, is that sufficient experience for licensure? Nothing against bookkeepers in general, but you know, CPA is a license that's dedicated to public protection, and we want to make sure that the appropriate competencies are there when somebody becomes licensed.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate that. I do have one question that I was asked, and I didn't have the answer, and maybe you will. But I was making a presentation at another group called the American Academy of Attorneys and CPAs on behalf of the Board of Accountancy. Several of the members had asked me the question about the 120 and the 150. One individual there gave their personal experience in that they had graduated with a degree in accounting, a baccalaureate 4-year degree in accounting, and had, by virtue of that, completed all of the accounting and business requirements. They had to take another 30 hours, including Russian literature. The individual said they enjoyed the opportunity to go to school again for another 30 hours, but they were doing 30 hours completely unrelated to anything in accounting. And fortunately, they had the wherewithal to pay for that. I believe her parents were paying for the additional 30 hours. But the question there is, you know, that then you've got Russian literature, which doesn't have anything to do with the practice of accounting, and yet that would take the place of 1 year of general work experience. So I didn't know how to answer that one, and maybe you've heard that one before.
A couple different things, and actually, we actually met with some of your leaders of that group because they were asking if those hours for law school could be counted toward that 30 hours. And in some states, and probably in the majority of the states, yes, that could be. And they wanted to make sure of that. To answer your question, different states have different rules. Florida does dictate more of their 30 hours. It doesn't prevent California from dictating. I can tell you way back when I was on those task forces to go to the 150, we tried to have it go right to a master's program, but we got pushback from academia because they couldn't pivot quick enough. So that is part of the reason we're having these discussions, is because we were not able at the time to dictate the 30. We have seen that some people don't get their master's in accounting or tax or IT, but they are very well-rounded individuals with going for other 30 hours that are meaningful for the profession. But of course, you're always going to have some. Russian literature, actually, I like that than what normally comes out. And I'm not even going to mention it because I hate it. Dan, do you want to go?
No, you're absolutely right. We actually met with leadership of that group a few months ago, and they explained some of the hurdles they have. And just as Stephanie said, AICPA and NASBA work on the Uniform Accountancy Act, and it's a model act that jurisdictions can use when they're looking to amend their laws and rules. And while we encourage, following that format, many times there are nuances that are required by policy or by law in states that they do vary. And so you do end up with some variance about what is accepted for education across the country. And hopefully those types of barriers are minimal, and especially somebody who's going to spend the time to go to law school for 3 years, they shouldn't necessarily be prohibited from meeting that 120 and then having an additional 3 years of education from meeting the competencies that are required to complete the exam, SPP, whatever it needs to be to become licensed.
Okay, Ms. Lara, sorry.
Thank you, President Rosenbaum. I was going to hold my comments till later, but since the topic has arisen, I'll go ahead and speak it now. I just wanted to share my personal experience with the 150 units. I actually graduated in December of 2013. The change to 150 units occurred January 2014, so I could not pre-plan to take or have a master's degree, and I didn't have the funds to be able to do that. So I am one of those people who had to do the community college classes to satisfy the 30 hours. And I'm also one of those people who did not take any accounting subjects or business subjects for those 30 units because that was satisfied with my 120 unit bachelor's degree. So I just wanted to speak to the mentality of a candidate in that situation. You're already working full-time and overtime as a staff, and it's very challenging to also have to prepare for the CPA exam and potentially take additional courses. At the time, I felt the most pressing matter was to pass the CPA exam because to me that was the more challenging of the two tasks, and I felt it better to tackle that first and then circle back to the classes later, which is what I did. So I passed the CPA exam and then had to do the 30 units a full year later, so I didn't get the I didn't meet all those requirements until well after I had passed the exam. So I just wanted to point that out. I don't think personally that the 30 units added much to my competency as the CPA. I just took things of personal interest and that were easy, honestly, just given the workload. And when you're in that situation of taking community college classes that aren't counting towards your GPA or your degree program, there's no necessity to perform particularly well in the class. You just need to pass the class. So from that perspective, it can not add much value because really you just need to pass the class to get the hours and then get your license. So I just wanted to throw those thoughts out there. And even though passing the CPA exam and doing your education does demonstrate competency from an academic perspective, and it shows the aptitude of an individual, it shows their willingness and professionalism and perseverance to be a part of this profession. Good CPAs are made through gaining quality work experience. That's where good CPAs are made. So those first few years of your profession are very critical to make sure that you're getting quality experience, that you're getting support and mentorship from quality CPAs. So for me, I give more weight to gaining that quality experience and am very much support of these initiatives we're developing where maybe those additional 2 years and the 120 units can be an option with the parameters that we eventually develop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations
Qualifying
on what you
question?
did. That was not an easy path. I appreciate what you did to become a CPA.
Thank you.
Ms. Dong, do you have a qualifying question?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Ms. Lotta, for sharing your comments about your experience. I did have a question. So this is Nancy Dong. I'm a public member. And just, thank you for the presentation today. From a model perspective, it seems that the SPP seems to shift the burden and also the influence of the process for licensure to hiring entities. So sort of dovetailing Ms. Law's comments, with respect to young professionals, are you now required to stick with a quote-unquote bad employer until you are done, receiving those experiential credits, or, are they portable? And on the other hand, for some of the firms that are hiring and taking the risk of hiring a new professional, what protections do they have that after you've invested 1, 2, 3 years on someone that they will stay with you? And, sort of a follow-up on that, and obviously we are not in a position where we can influence wages, but are employers then less likely to raise wages to market rate because now they're offering this experiential ability to replace the credits that they would otherwise need to do in school?
All great questions, and I'll start a little bit. You were taking notes, so you probably heard most of it. I can, to answer your question, yes. Oh, are you hearing an echo? Dan, why don't you do that?
Yeah, I think our intent is that if this would be an ongoing process, so if the individual and the supervisor worked together for 1 year and that individual then left and went to another employer, they've already entered information into the tracking system. So that would be portable and go with them. We developed, and I'll step back and talk about ELE also, because I think there's sort of some parallels here. With the Experience, Learn, and Earn program, the individual and the employer have the ability to work together to identify coursework that would be valuable to them as an employee of the firm, of the business entity, whatever it is. So by participating in that program, and I think the same thing with SPP, you're working within a firm or within a business entity, being trained on how to do a competent job in whatever your position is. And so I don't see why the employer would not recognize that they are advancing in their skill set and in their competencies, that they wouldn't hold them or pay them to market wages. If that was the case, they are gaining that experience and that competency that they could be portable enough and go to another employer. To me, it's a deficit to the employer to not want to pay market wages to somebody who's being trained to do a job, whether it's in public accounting or business and industry.
All right, thank you. Let's have one more question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is Katrina Salazar. Thank you for coming here today. You mentioned the task force principles. I think you mentioned pushback that was communicated surrounding complexity. And so, I think my question is, it is not in the principles, but can you speak to the vision of the task force? Because I think one of the concerns that I've heard is that, will this be scalable for small employers? So, how difficult is this going to be? And is that something that your committee is actively evaluating as they consider processes going forward?
Absolutely. One of the main principles was that this be scalable to employers of all sizes. And we don't want to create something that would not be useful while in numbers, the larger firms may hire more people. When you look at firms, most firms, the majority of firms are smaller firms. And so while they may only hire one or two or a few people each year, it's important that they have the opportunity for their employees to participate in the program as well. And the same holds true for business and industry or government. They may not have as many people coming in, but we want to make sure that whatever the final model is, that the competencies are attainable enough and they are flexible enough for them to participate. It's key that small employers be able to use this program as well.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Saunders and Mr. Dustin. We're going to move on now from the national discussions to something that's happening here in California. I'm going to turn this over to Meredith Johnson, who is the 2023-24 chair of the California Society of CPAs, to give us an update regarding the CPA pipeline. Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much for your introduction and for your time today to all of the members. We brought with you a little bit of the conversation related to our efforts on strengthening the CPA pipeline here in California, starting from kindergarten all the way through what our current professionals are doing today. So we're looking forward to sharing with you some of the ways that we're working, and I've just learned how to switch things on WebEx, so hold on for just a moment. To shift the identity of the profession. We also would like to share with you a little bit about what our CalCPA is to strategically address the root causes that are impacting the pipeline, as well as our efforts to proactively engage in the dialogue around what a modern CPA licensure framework of the future could look like. Shifting the identity of the CPA profession is actually one of our CalCPA's strategic outcomes. We're devoting time and resources to telling a better story about the profession and what it does, and redefining perceptions about that profession. The approach is really a big part of why and how we approached our new brand, which we rolled out just about a year ago. We need to share how the profession offers numerous opportunities across various industries, how it provides economic stability, is trusted and recognized, and offers flexible work-life options, and what that looks like in practice, how it helps and impacts the economy, businesses, and communities around the world. The really good news is that the profession has a good story to tell. We all just need to get a little bit better at telling it. Many of CalCPA's pipeline programs fall under our CalCPA Institute, which is our 501c3. The Institute's programs focus on pipeline support, financial wellness, student outreach, young professional guidance, and DE&I initiatives. Specific to the pipeline, the Institute is reimagining every interaction with the accounting pipeline from high school to young professionals. Here are some of the things that we're doing. Under the umbrella of belonging, pipeline, and engagement, Institute programs include funding the future. So this might include private and corporate funding for scholarships, grants, and programs designed to support individuals who are currently pursuing accounting careers. Guiding career pathways, helping students, career changers, that includes me, and emerging professionals to select a suitable career path and identify opportunities for growth and advancement. Influencing professional development, such as creating mentorship programs, continuing education opportunities, and career advancement resources to help young members thrive in an ever-evolving profession. An example of something we're doing in this arena includes bringing best practices such as events, things like Pathway to Partner, to different corners of the state so that people mid-career can see what those different possibilities are that are out there as they move through their careers and professional and personal lives. Inspiring the next generation, student outreach, promoting financial wellness to K-8 students, planning high school field trips to local firms, preparing our community college students to transfer to a four-year accounting program, and more. Collaboration and partnering. We know this is essential. This includes partnerships with AICPA, other state societies, the CAQ on their Accounting Plus, and the CBA, among many others. And then, of course, fostering a community of belonging, actively supporting initiatives aimed at increasing representation, promoting a climate of inclusivity, and fostering a culture of belonging to everyone, including meeting members and potential CPAs where they are. This slide highlights some of the programming and partnerships and how we try to tie them together as individuals enter and move through the CPA pipeline. K through 8, we know that students have different educational experiences depending where they may be attending school, and they may not be familiar with accounting or with business in general. So this is where we're putting our professionals in the classroom, teaching age-appropriate financial literacy curriculum to both introduce them to different concepts as well as introduce them to CPAs, who they are and what they do. Most recently, the treasurer of our board of directors, Jillian Fan, spent the day with a group of 4th graders, teaching them what all of the parts are of a moving economy. For high school students, we provide Accounting for All field trips. This is an opportunity where we schedule field trips for high school students to visit schools of accountancy, including most recently USC's School of Accounting. Overall, our high school programs have allowed us to reach 5,000 students to introduce them to what those accounting careers might look like and how they might move into their collegiate experience. At the college level, we used to have student ambassadors, and now we call them industry influencers, on 27 college campuses, and they're tasked with promoting the profession on campus. Our scholarship program. We give away more than $300,000 a year in scholarships, with 40% or more of that going to community colleges. Last week, we gave away $45,000 in San Diego, and it felt really good to hand out those big checks. One of the things that we're doing to support community colleges specifically is helping support tuition reimbursement and book reimbursement, because we know that for many of those community college students, it's the books that cost a lot more than the classes do. Moving on to engagement. Exam preparation. This has obviously been a big hot topic this last year as we've seen the move to CPA evolution. We provide both webinar and on-demand classes that address the changes to the new CPA exam and how to formulate a plan to successfully pass that exam. We also have been coordinating with the CBA, and thank you to those of you who've been working with us on the Exam Credit Relief Initiative. That's actually, we've heard a lot of great testimonials from candidates who've said, that's helped me get over the finish line to become a CPA. Licensure, the CPA Evolution webpage. We have an online resource for students and candidates to stay up to date on exam requirements, licensure requirements, renewing a license, et cetera, all with links to the CBA site. And we're also coordinating with the CBA on the SURE project to help streamline that process. And then post-licensure. Our Leadership Institute is a 5-day program for CPAs who are seeking to excel as business and volunteer leaders. It's accessible to CPAs throughout the state of California, and we have 400 graduates who have gone on to leadership roles across the profession. Our DE&I efforts support inclusiveness and belonging throughout all of the programs that we're doing through the Cal CPA Institute. I wanted to highlight one of the programs that's gotten a lot of positive traction, which is our Community College to CPA program. Community colleges are an untapped opportunity and more becoming a gateway into professional careers, whether that's students coming straight out of high school who don't exactly know what they want to do next, or people coming back mid-career looking for a change. The program is dedicated to preparing community college students for transferring from a community college to a 4-year accounting program. We help address pain points in the process, and we try to bring new opportunities to campuses. Right now, we're working with 27 community college schools, and we've been able to connect with more than 2,000 students. We've also seen that this is a great area where we've had firm engagement. The firms are really interested in the pipeline that provides for local talent, either for internships, entry-level employees, or getting in there to get their brand recognition among that population. As we saw the conversation on the new licensure concepts progress, Cal CPA created an advisory group that's ready to evaluate, provide feedback, and help inform what these new concepts could look like. This group is engaged as a cross-section of the profession, interested in supporting California and being proactive in discussions around the pipeline. We're very thankful that the CBA has been participating as invited stakeholders to provide an important regulatory perspective as things are considered. Let me tell you what we've been doing so far with the CPAG. The group has met throughout the spring, even though it's busy season, to discuss emerging proposals from the AICPA, NASBA, and other states, and how they interplay with CPA mobility, substantial equivalency, and consumer protection. This group has also helped inform how we've provided comments on exposure drafts, particularly the NASBA, SPP, and the AICPA concepts. We're also grateful that the CBA staff have shared some high-level licensing concepts that they've been thinking about as well at those meetings. The refined simplicity of the licensure model and how it can facilitate refinement of mobility and substantial equivalency models makes the concept very intriguing to explore, and we found this to be a very helpful dialogue. We're appreciative of the CBA's willingness to be thought leaders in the pipeline conversation, and we've been excited to see where this develops next. Lastly, as you've heard today, we have a lot of great groups that are doing work to both bring people to the profession and then reevaluate what a modern licensure framework will look like. But we know that none of this can be done in a vacuum. We know we need to align, coordinate our efforts, and leverage each other's strengths. CalCPA is committed to being a proactive participant and engaging with the CBA and other stakeholders to strengthen consumer protection and advance the CPA profession as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the efforts that you've done, and thank you very much for your presentation. At this time, the board, do we have any clarifying questions?
I want to thank you for coming. Thank you for the presentation. And I remember you sharing your story of how you came to the profession when we were out at Pomona. And so it's really great to see you as the leader of this effort. I also wanted to just acknowledge an appreciation for looking at young folks and current students and trying to evaluate solutions for this issue. What I feel like is missing from a lot of this is I feel like we're talking a lot about to one another as opposed to talking to younger folks. And so I just wanted to hear you talk a little bit more about the work that y'all are doing in the K through 12. And I noticed in one of the slides that there was an effort to potentially get the accounting principles approved as an AP course as part of the business principles. And then also there's going to be, I guess, there's research being done to Gen Z specifically about their motivations. Like, to what extent are you all involved in those efforts, or are you leading those efforts? I wasn't sure whether it's CalCPA or whether it's AICPA. So just a little bit more about how looking at younger folks and their motivations is a strategy towards growing the profession.
I think one of the great things about the CPA profession is that people are really focused on giving back and sharing their knowledge. We're really fortunate within our CalCPA membership to have an army of volunteers that are ready to go into classrooms where they're able to do so. One of the things that we're really focused on in this area is partnerships, because we know that there are already programs that are available to be used in classrooms. We just need that classroom access. So sometimes we are building from some of the curriculum that we have. Depending on the age, it may be curriculum that's in partnership with other folks who are doing great work in this area, and we can provide our talent to do a program in a day for an entire elementary school, for example, so that every classroom gets a CPA who can teach a class, but we're using curriculum that's been developed by specialists who are working with those different age groups.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other? Yes, Ms. Lada.
Thank you, President Rosenbaum, and thank you so much for your presentation. I know you're working on some diversity efforts in part of the pipeline initiative, but on your slide about the pipeline engagement and your partnership, I didn't see any mention of partnering with any of the diverse accounting groups such as National Association of Black Accountants or Alliance for Black Women Accountants, or there's also some for Latin and Filipino populations that AICPA notes on their website. So I was just curious if there was any partnership with those organizations.
Thanks so much for asking. I can give you a couple of very recent examples, actually. So 2 weeks ago, we held our annual Women's Leadership Forum, which kind of flips between Northern and Southern California. And we partnered with firms across the state to sponsor 14 young women in collaboration with ABWA to bring them to that conference. So these are students who are at the collegiate, graduate, or kind of within the first couple of years within their career, so they wouldn't normally have the financial resources to be a part of that conversation. So our continued collaboration with ABWA, with Ascend, and with other specific cohort groups is allowing us to reach into classrooms and reach out to young accounting professionals and the accounting curious to meet them where they are and be part of their events as well as inviting them to ours.
Okay, thank you. And I just had a couple more questions. So under your programs, you mentioned the Industry Influencer Program, which I think is a clever name for the climate now. How do the student ambassadors promote things on campus? Do they share anything, or do you guys suggest they do certain things? And then if you mentioned the Modern Accountant, I was just curious. I don't know if I missed a brief overview of what that is.
Sure. So our industry influencers know their campus better than we do. So for some campuses where you have a lot of commuters, what that outreach will look like is a little different than a place where you have a lot of residential students. We give them a lot of flexibility and latitude to figure out what's going to work best in terms of inviting accounting students or business students to different events, inviting us to Zoom into their meetings or come into classrooms, and then spread the word about our scholarship programs. So one of the ways that we get word out about the scholarships is, of course, through our accounting faculty, but we also use our industry influencers to share that information with their networks as well. We try to use social media as much as possible and give them the tools to do that. CalCPA does have a social media manager who helps curate content that can be shared across different platforms so that we know that we're reaching students as well as professionals, depending on whether something's going out via Instagram or LinkedIn. And we can also ask folks who are within our volunteer network to share and amplify those events as well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And the Modern Accountant, what was that program?
So one of the things that we're looking at is ways in which the experience of being a CPA is different today than it was 5 or 10 years ago, and what are the new skills that are required and what will be required 5 or 10 years in the future. So when I talk to students, they get a lot of messages about, what's generative AI going to do to my job? And I actually think that's one of the really exciting pieces of what's happening within public accounting, because it provides an opportunity for us to move beyond being data crunchers to being data analysts and recommenders, and the appropriate use of generative AI, I think, will be part of a modern accounting toolkit moving forward as well.
Okay, thank you. We have another question, Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you so much. The Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman, I can't remember what his department is called, the State Department of Education or whatever. Is he or his department involved in any of this, so that there can be some top-down recommendations and suggestions and even regulations?
We've been supportive of efforts to enhance financial literacy education generally in K-12 schools in California. I can't speak specifically to our coordination with his department, but I'm sure that Jason Fox in his role here in Sacramento may be able to provide some additional context for you.
Jason Fox with CalCPA. Specific to Supervisor Tony Thurman, I know he's been a proponent of financial wellness courses in high school curriculums, and so separate from this, CalCPA is supporting legislation that would make that as a condition of high school graduation, and our board had a conversation last week. There's an initiative pending that might be before the voters in November that would do something similar, and we, from a CalCPA standpoint, and the broad financial literacy community has supported those initiatives. And the reason I bring that up is I think Tony Thurman's been a proponent in both of those efforts, and so not necessarily direct coordination, but kind of similar, moving in the same direction.
Ms. Du?
Mine is not a clarifying question. I just realized that, so I can hold off until we have discussion.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Oh, sorry.
Question. So thank you so much, and I I really appreciate the work that Cal CPA is doing, particularly with community colleges. I think, you know, Cal State system and the UC system are wonderful places for students, but what I like about community colleges is that you're not just reaching students coming out of high school, but also professionals who have taken a career break, perhaps for maternity leave or paternity leave, and they're coming back in and looking at bookkeeping and whatnot. What are some of the other things that you're doing in terms of touching that population? And it might be a general question, not just for Cal CPA, but for NASBA and AICPA, where we're looking not just at young students, but we're looking at mid-career professionals who want to change careers, perhaps retool, rebrand themselves as CPAs.
Sure. Within that community college to CPA program, although a lot of it is focused on getting folks from a 2-year through a 4-year degree, we know there are a lot of people who are changing careers as well. So we can be flexible with the population that's attending any one of those events to share with them, you know, what part they might be in the licensure process. We can also direct them to the CBA's SURE program so that they can look and see where their units might be needed to fit in there as well. And then with some of the free CPE that Cal CPA is providing, we're trying to address the demands that career changers have on their time, and I think this applies to anyone in the workforce as well. We have a free financial and mental well-being series. So we do this throughout the year to try and address topics like work-life balance, looking at ways that you can build resiliency, and we know that trying to craft new CPAs also means supporting them as a whole person, and we're engaged in that process.
I would encourage, if I can, and I don't know if this counts as a comment, but I would encourage Cal CPA to not only increase their outreach, grassroots outreach to ethnic affinity groups, as was mentioned by Ms. Wada, but also to find other types of associations that cater to women who are coming back into the workforce, men coming back into the workforce, and are looking for pathways. Maybe the workforce program that is sponsored by the state of California, or it could be regional programs at a county level.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. Let's move along, and item 5 on our agenda is again Ms. Center, who is going to give us an update on the CBA's activities regarding the CBA pipeline and discussion on possible revisions to California's requirements for CPA licensure.
Thank you. President Rosenbaum, I did say it was a mega item, so it definitely has been. So this memo 5 within your packet, presents an alternative licensure framework and is intended to spur conversations about updating licensure requirements to address the CPA pipeline and transition to a more evergreen definition of substantial equivalency as a means of protecting mobility. While I hope to get your feedback on the framework itself, I also hope to hear from you on your interest and direction on updating licensure requirements in California and proactively working to influence the definition of substantial equivalency. Before we talk about the framework itself, I want to share what staff considered when drafting it. You can follow along starting on the bottom of page 4 of your memo. Number 1, what could be done to provide greater assurances to individuals that completion of a degree with an accounting concentration would be an automatic completion of the educational requirements? I have a personal goal, and my personal goal is that people don't get so excited about getting transcript reviews when we go to college campuses, because that's a signal of confusion in my mind that they can't do that themselves. So my personal goal is not so much enthusiasm about those reviews of transcripts that we currently do every time we go on campus, but instead they have assurance in their mind about what they need to do to complete that education. Number 2, is there a way to modernize the narrative regarding education to not simply be a discussion focused on the terms 150 and 120 semester units? Number 3, how can regulators develop requirements that consider the expertise of the various groups involved in the education, examination, and experience processes? Number 4, A proposed framework should not simply look at the educational requirements alone, but understand the impact changes may have on mobility and make allowances for mobility to continue effectively. Number 5, what, if any, information has staff received that completion of 150 semester units and the specific coursework increases consumer protection? Number 6, consider refocusing the conversations regarding mobility from the education requirement back to the examination requirement. Many of these conversations were drawn from the responses or considerations. Many of these considerations were drawn from the responses to the students understanding the requirements to be a CPA or SURE CPA project. Starting on page 3 of the memo, you can find the SURE CPA initiatives supported by this board, as well as 2 new initiatives that were added in response to the CBA feedback at the last meeting, which was to include ideas outside of the 150 semester unit requirement. The first new initiative is to support mobility, and the second new initiative is to recognize the expertise of CPAs as supervising experience and college and universities. The chart on page 7 of the memo provides an overview of how the framework aligns with the SURE CPA initiatives. And you can see that we have checked off between the 2 pathways all of the initiatives within the framework that you have as part of this item. The goal of this framework that can be found as attachment 3 or in very small print up on the monitors is to allow states to have flexibility in defining their own educational requirements without compromising mobility across jurisdictions. You might ask yourself how it attempts to safeguard mobility. It does so by being a starting point for conversations across states about how to update and modernize the concept of substantial equivalency. These conversations are vital, given states are passing legislation to eliminate the 150 semester unit requirement in their states. This framework provides a vehicle for California to be a part of those mobility conversations that are already happening nationally. The framework maintains its reliance on the 3 E's. This is part of your framework that you have as attachment 3 on the screen. It does not modify the examination requirement. It does not modify expectation of what occurs during the gathering of experience. The hope is to shift the conversation about mobility away from the semester unit requirement and instead focus on a degree requirement and recognize that we already have a stable, rigorous, and uniform requirement in the CPA exam. Shifting the focus away from the semester unit requirement to the degree requirement provides for a more evergreen approach to the education requirement as colleges and universities explore alternatives to the traditional degree requirements. It also provides, Manny, I need assistance. It also provides states the opportunity to develop educational requirements that meet the needs of their population demographics. Sorry, you don't see it, but my battery's running low up here. The framework also relies more heavily on the experts within each of the 3 E's. CPAs should be seen as the experts in the experience requirement instead of asking firms to implement instructional modules as some other solutions have suggested. Institutions of higher education should be recognized for their expertise in putting together accounting programs, reducing the need for state boards of accountancy to review courses. And of course, AICPA is the developer and NASBA is the administrator of our CPA exam. So how does this all fit together? Well, it is an enhancement on the pathways that were used prior to the 150 semester unit requirement. To be clear, the framework does not recommend going back to the 120 units. As a reminder, when California eliminated its prior non-150 semester unit pathway and allowed licensure under 150 units, it did so solely because it was necessary to maintain its substantial equivalency definition. So let's turn our attachment to that attachment 3 in your item or on the screen. You will see that Pathway 1 is for those with a baccalaureate or higher that don't fit within Pathway 2. So there are 2 options within Pathway 1. Those who have an accounting degree, you all saw my air quotes there, and those with non-accounting degrees that still need to have a concentration of accounting-related courses. There is still some work to determine how we might want to define what an accounting degree is. We're currently researching the degree offerings at the top colleges that California applicants receive a baccalaureate or advanced degree from. But for illustrative purposes today, let's say it's any degree with the accounting term in the degree conferred. And before you get too excited, I'm almost positive this will not be the sole definition. But for illustrative purposes only, that's what we're going to use today. So attachment 2 provides some examples. So for example, if an individual has a BS in business administration with the accounting option from Cal Poly Pomona, shout out to those on the line from Cal Poly, thank you for joining us. They would be deemed to have met all the educational requirements without a review of the actual courses taken. So I think of this as the expressway to licensure. If you're in one of those programs, you will know that if you complete that program and earn that degree, you will have met the educational requirements. So how does it work for those with that non-accounting degree? Well, they would need to have a concentration in accounting-related coursework. So if you look at attachment 1, that's an example of what it might look like. So in these cases where an applicant does not have an accounting degree, staff would not only review their transcripts for a degree conferred, but also the courses taken, similar to how transcripts are reviewed today. One important difference is that there is no 150 semester unit requirement. While some students might need 150 units to go that, to get that concentration in accounting, some will not. This eliminates what some call the hollow 30, some refer to it as basket weaving courses, or President Rosenbaum, was it Russian literature? Yes. The course requirements you see presented on the screen are for illustrative and discussion purposes. They are based on the Uniform Accountancy Act model rules. There are a few modifications. I've outlined the modifications in the footnote on that attachment in terms of how they differ from the model rules. Courses in such subjects as natural sciences, journalism, and theology were eliminated. Courses in ethics are reduced. Given the SURE CPA feedback we received, the ethics is more broadly included in the curriculum now compared to when the 10-unit requirement was established. The removal of the 150-unit requirement allows for the course requirements to be more focused on accounting and business, as you can see in attachment 1. It is important to point out that Pathway 1 allows for additional experience to make up for the reduction in education by requiring 2 years of experience. This is experience that isn't on a student's transcript, similar to NASBA's SPP solution and AICPA's, quote, near-term solution. Pathway 2 recognizes the increased knowledge that is gained when a student earns a master's in accounting, taxation, or laws and taxation by only requiring 1 year of experience. In the end, we believe the framework has the potential to positively impact the CPA pipeline because it incentivizes accounting degrees, reduces student educational costs, and minimizes student stress and confusion when it comes to satisfying the educational requirements, while streamlining and simplifying the entire process and maintaining the rigor of the overall licensure model. To ensure we did not draft the framework in a vacuum, Mr. Franzella and I had the opportunity to share and receive feedback on this framework with professional organizations, pipeline working groups, CPAs, and other state executive directors, as well as university faculty. The feedback has been almost entirely positive. I'm not supposed to name names, but I can tell you the quote, "I love it," was shared with us numerous times. So, for example, we specifically heard things about the simplicity of the draft framework and the positive impact it could have on those individuals who cannot afford an extra year of college to gain the 150 semester units. While there continues to be a few states that are supportive of continuing with a 150 semester unit requirement, it is unclear if those opinions are based on a concern with, quote, breaking mobility, or a belief that is beneficial for consumers. As I mentioned earlier, the framework is intended to spur conversations about updating licensure requirements that address the CPA pipeline and transition to a more evergreen definition of substantial equivalency. Also, if you think back to the AICPA presentation, I think this framework provides a solution that could fit into their near-term solution category as it relates to a model of off-transcript experiential learning delivered by the employer. The conversations we are hoping to open around this framework fit within the AICPA's idea of an, quote, intentional and coordinated approach to managing potential disruption to CPA practice mobility. Lastly, if you turn your attention to page 10 of the item, you will see some questions. We wrote those questions before the release of AICPA's National Pipeline Advisory Group Strategic Plan that occurred this week. That plan was emailed to members and it was also included in your folder. The strategic plan suggests an approach including a near-term solution that addresses off-transcript experiential learning and a long-term solution based on a competency approach. Staff believe the framework presented in this memo could fit within the strategic plan near-term solution and may be more favorable than using SPP as the near-term solution. Given these recent developments and the timelines you have heard today from AICPA and NASBA, you may wish to expand what you consider beyond what was presented on page 10. For example, you may want to think about providing general or specific feedback on the framework, directing staff to gather additional feedback from stakeholders, communicating your support of the framework, providing a response to the AICPA's National Pipeline Advisory Group Strategic Plan, suggesting the framework as a potential near-term solution, and/or directing staff to draft bill language for a statutory change to implement the framework for consideration at a future board meeting. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer clarifying questions before inviting the other presenters to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Center, and thank you and Mr. Franzella for all your effort on this. I think it's a very thoughtful approach. I'm glad that you've been able to share it with other stakeholders because, as one of our earlier presenters said, it's critical that that this be an effort that is seen by all, and hopefully whatever the solution is, it needs to be one that is something that fits for maybe not everyone, but certainly most. So let's first start with some clarifying questions. Ms. Tu.
Thank you. I actually do have a clarifying question. On the two pathways that you mentioned, Ms. Center, help me understand the 2 years experience or 1 year experience with a master's degree. I thought when somebody passed the CPA licensing exam, they are a CPA. When do we expect them to have that experience, the 2 years or the 1 year? And how do you track it?
That's a great question. I think that is a difference in what you see presented here and what California currently does, and maybe what you saw presented as part of the SPP model in terms of when experience is done. So as we know, you need to get all 3 of those E's in order to be a CPA. But in California, there is no requirement about when you can get your experience. So for example, you can get your experience prior to applying to sit for the CPA exam. I believe, as was presented earlier, that that is something that is being considered as part of the SPP in terms of needing that. Currently, that would not be required in California. You can get that experience as you are getting your education.
The 3 E's, the last 2 can be interchangeable. No, can be flipped, I should say, not interchangeable.
You are correct. There's lots of flexibility in how you go about the timing of doing these things. In fact, I've been working very closely with David Hemphill, who is working on how we can visually display those pathways to licensure and really showcase that flexibility in terms of order.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Loudon?
Sorry, another question from me today. Thank you, Ms. Center, for your presentation. In pursuing Pathway 1, I know today for illustrative purposes, we just looked at hypothetically degrees with the accounting designation. If we were to practically implement this, would staff would there be an overall review of each California school? Is that even possible, or is that too labor intensive? So if that is too labor intensive, what would be the alternative to evaluating these programs before we pursue that pathway?
So the proposal in front of you in terms of this framework would be that we would look at a transcript on what degree is conferred. How we define what that degree is in terms of an accounting degree is yet to be determined, but instead of reviewing individual colleges, we would look at the degree conferred, and we would provide trust and respect to the universities that they are putting together programs that are appropriate if they have deemed them to be, for example, a bachelor's in accountancy. In terms of the changes that we are looking at, one of the changes that we may want to entertain has to do with certain degree combinations in association with a minor in accounting, which you don't see here. But we believe that some of those may also be appropriate in terms of having a real concentration of accounting courses, which is really what we're hoping to see.
Go ahead.
Thank you. He was making eye signal, but I wasn't sure about it. So the center, the universities you mentioned, it's very popular to get a business degree these days. So probably the list of classes that you mentioned will qualify. So in Pathway 1, they can call it a minor in accountants or whatever the case may be. But as you know, just in terms of outreach and all the stuff like that, I just know business degree is very popular degree to get for most young people these days. So how, other than doing the transcript verification, it doesn't matter what that bachelor degree is called.
So what that degree is in designates whether or not you're in Pathway 1 or Pathway 2. You are correct that we often see business degrees, right? Some of those degree options are associated with what the university refers to as a, quote, concentration in, and then it might be marketing, it might be accounting, for example, or they say, quote, emphasis in, and they use those same terms. Those terms are designated on the transcripts that we receive. We've actually reviewed to determine that they are, and they are. But for example, maybe your college doesn't have that concentration or emphasis option for you, then it might be that we want to look at okay, you have a degree in business with a, quote, minor in accounting. Might that also fit that same definition of an accounting degree that gives us that assurance that they've had courses with a concentration in accounting?
Ms. Corrigan.
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. It's very meaningful, very helpful. To kind of tack on to a couple of questions that have just occurred. So I know there are many differences with the colleges and universities and how they label programs, how they label courses, and that sort of thing. So are we comfortable, or I guess somehow we need to be comfortable with just saying, okay, you have that degree, you must have met all of these educational requirements, were satisfied. And then on an ongoing basis, do we assume that? Do we check back and look at their accreditation ratings? You know, they go through these accreditations every so often. So have we thought, or are we at the point yet to really have considered that part of it? Thank you.
So you are correct. They do need to be accredited. And that is part of what we look at when we look at transcripts and accepting degrees and courses. Are we comfortable? If we were providing a license based solely on education experience, I would say we would not be comfortable. But we have that examination, which is rigorous, which is common across all states, all jurisdictions. So if you're asking for my personal opinion, I would be comfortable because that is there. We do not have the staffing currently that would allow us to review the educational programs at various colleges and universities. We also do not have the expertise probably to do that. Does that answer, Ms. Corrigan?
Does, thank you. And so, but would we then periodically revisit, you know, Cal Poly Pomona, they went through their accreditation renewal or whatever. How did they fare? How did they do? Would we do that sort of thing on an ongoing basis?
So every time we get a transcript to review, we do ensure that it is from an accredited university. We always do that.
My question is one about experience. During one of the presentations, the concept was that an additional year of experience was not as valuable as an additional 30 hours of education, which is not really what my experience, not to use experience too many times, but that's not my, wasn't what when I was working as a young staff, I was given increasingly complex tasks and increasing responsibility over the years. And so I found that the second year was a lot more valuable than the first year. But the question there is when a CPA does apply for or a candidate applies for a license, you do look for and evaluate the experience, particularly those who are signing off on the various tasks, and to ensure that it was valuable experience when they are getting their license.
I think that's an important point, and what makes California different from other states, and maybe needs to be reflected as we consider some of the comments earlier, is that we do have a very separate requirement for those who do want to sign on those engagement reports. Right, that experience has to be done within specified 5 areas. There is an opinion that is given by that supervisor. That supervisor must not only be licensed, but they also must have the education experience associated with the attest function. So that area that is most critical or has the ability to for things to go bad, I guess, if you want to think about it that way, that experience requirement is more robust comparatively to our general experience requirement.
Thank you. Ms. Batchelor? Oh, sorry, Ms. Ward?
All right, thank you. I have just a fast question. For the Pathway 1, non-accounting degree plus accounting-related courses, since you said we're not really looking at a minor per se, is there a limit? Like you can't take one class and then experience and apply. Are you looking for 12 units, 9 units? What are you looking for?
Sure, I can answer that. So when you look at Pathway 1, you really need to do that in conjunction with the other 2 attachments. So, thank you, David. So the accounting degree, that's the one where we gave you some examples. We limited that to California examples, but honestly, it would not be limited to California colleges and universities. And so that's where we would see that, is that particular attachment. But then the second bullet, which is non-accounting degrees, so that's someone who has a degree, let's say, in theater, and they decide they want to do accounting, then they would need to show us an accounting concentration. And that's when you go to the specific courses that you see. They're on the screen here, and they were included as, remembering, I believe, attachment 2, if I remember correctly. Those are similar, I would say, to what you would see if you went to a college and you received a degree in accounting. Those college and university requirements vary across each college and university, but they are similar to what you see here, which we took from the model rules.
Yes, but so they're not required to take 27 units, though. Oh, all 27.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, if you have a non-accounting degree, you would be required to take these courses. That may get you to 150 units, it may not, depending on what it is, but we believe that is very similar to the course requirements that you see in that other bullet, which is an accounting degree.
Okay, thank you so much.
Just one clarifying piece as we, sorry, Ms. Batchelor, I apologize, to that is that what you see here on the slide and in your slide, or in this attachment, is just a starting point. It doesn't mean that you're going to land on 27 units. It doesn't mean you're going to land on wherever it is. There is a lot of discussion that still needs to be had if this is the kind of direction you and the board, or the board as a whole, wants to take. So there's a lot of that flexibility related to, you know, maybe a minor can either qualify for certain areas or all areas or be part of that expressway. So there's a lot of work left to be done, but don't look to that specific 27 units and go, they have to do that, because we don't know yet until that's more fleshed out.
I'd like to ask a question about the experience aspect of it, and specifically in DEI for minority groups, because I know African Americans and Latinos have basically turned away from the profession. So my question is, what's being done to give those particular groups the confidence that they can get into the profession and get the proper experience? And are employers on board, aware, and different things like that? Because from my experience, which was a long time ago, getting the education, I did it, you know, that was very tangible for me to do myself. I had the power to do that. Passing the CPA exam was tough, but I got through it and I did it. But the difficulty lied in the experience aspect. I had to piecemeal my experience. And so when young people say, wow, you're a CPA? And I said, yes. And they said, wow, you know, I would like to do that. And I find myself not encouraging them to do that because of my experience. So say, for instance, now we'll say 10 years out, for people that probably entered the profession 10 years ago, what has been the minorities in the profession now? What's their experience like versus the experience I had? And how can they mentor and speak to college students, high school students, about saying, hey, come on in, this is great. This would be wonderful for you. I was wondering if, you know, if you can kind of elaborate on that. I should have probably asked the question earlier, but I didn't think of it earlier, so.
It's a great question, and of course we're all hopeful to see more diversity in the profession. Remind me later, I think there is some hope in the most recent trend report. I'm going to have to pull that up and share that with you, Ms. Batchelor, because I think there is a little hope in there when you look at one of those demographic groups that you just mentioned.
So, you know, as I talked about in my first memo, we're focusing today, in terms of my presentations, on the area where the board has the most influence. Those types of other portions of the pipeline where we don't have as much influence, we do rely more heavily on our partners. And I was really happy to hear when Ms. Johnson was presenting about some of the specific groups that they are partnering with, and we do rely on that heavily. I will say that one of the specific feedbacks that we did hear, and I believe he was from a small, medium-ish firm, if I remember correctly, was hopeful that the particular framework that we had presented would be helpful for those students because it allowed them to enter the workforce earlier and earn an income while they were gathering their experience instead of having to go back to school and get the 150. So there was a specific comment made by an individual from a firm that was particular to our framework, but I think you're looking for a more global response, probably more appropriately answered by Cal CPA or some of our other partners that were here today.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Corrigan.
Another clarification, on page 10 of the document, and it mentioned, you know, one of the comments, staff recommendations is, should staff get feedback from faculty on education requirements within attachment 1, which is the attachment that we're looking at on the screen. So all I want to ask is, at this point, you have not obtained faculty information in preparing the draft. Is that correct?
This was shared with faculty, just to be clear, as well as our thought on what we might define as an accounting degree. But in those meetings, we were really asking questions from a higher level perspective about what do you think about the framework. We did not yet dive into how we might define an accounting degree, how we might want to modify these. And I think that those would be that next level of conversations we would have.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on Ms. Center's comment, and I think she mentioned it during the presentation as well, the questions that you see on page 10, especially soliciting feedback, when we wrote this memo back, I think it was April 30th. It's funny is how much has happened between the 30th to today, and you even see it in the presentations we received today. We actually, once we finished this memo, with direction from leadership, we started sharing it and getting some of that feedback. And again, it's more at a, maybe not a 30,000 foot level, but a 10,000 foot level. So they have been an active participant in the dialogue. We would probably expose it more depending on if the board is supporting the framework and getting that information. So those questions were a starting point because we knew the board would want to be taking some kind of action, and this was our initial approach. But now that we've heard more about where people want to be, say by fall, it's kind of upped the, not stakes, but up the timeline a little bit more, and why Ms. Center has kind of posed some additional feedback type questions that we might be soliciting from this board.
Ms. Lara?
Thank you, President Rosenbaum. I had a question about the experience for Pathway 1, just in terms of CBA evaluating education requirements. Is it a common occurrence that we evaluate the transcripts of an accounting degree candidate and they don't meet the requirements? Does that happen?
That would be, I don't have the exact data, but I'm going to tell you, very common.
Common that they don't meet the requirements?
Correct.
Okay. And then I just had a few comments. President Rosenbaum highlighted that a second year of experience is far more valuable and enriching than a first year of experience. So I thought that was a very important distinction, that second year can be even more valuable than that first year in comparison to an additional 30 units. I thought that was a very good distinction to make. Something I wanted to point out is in terms of education and a way board members could feel comfortable about doing 120 unit requirement or some form of it with, you know, additional parameters. One thing that's not indicated is that after you get your degree or meet the requirements, CPAs have to take these review courses to actually pass the CPA exam. They need additional education and intense focus in a CPA exam review course, and those courses are very rigorous and extensive and only accounting specific focus. So I just think that's something that all of us CPAs up here know, but anyone who's not a CPA wouldn't be aware that there's still an additional layer of education that CPAs go through to pass that exam. So it is encompassed in that exam requirement, but I just wanted to highlight that for our non-CPA board members to understand that there's still even additional education built into our process already.
Ms. Corrigan.
Thank you. And I do want to comment for the non-CPAs that those CPA exam review courses are not required. They're something that one may choose. I did not, for example, take a review course, but then I was taking the exam very closely to after I graduated, where the information was fresh. Though I know of many people that did take, so they're not required, but they are time consuming. They are, I imagine they are expensive, but they are not required. So it kind of depends on the timing of one's pathway, you know, and what they feel they need in order to accomplish the exam. Thank you.
Ms. Center, when you earlier mentioned Ms. Lada's question regarding the experience, is that very subjective or objective? How, I mean, there might be built-in biases by the examiners that we are not aware of. So can you explain a little bit more?
Are you asking a question about when I said that it is common if you just have a degree in accounting that you would not meet? It is very common because, well, one thing, you probably don't have 150 units if all you have is a degree in accounting, right? So there's that. I don't know of any accounting programs that require 10 units of ethics. So there would also be that. So in terms of those things, is it subjective? It requires a level of expertise sometimes that is more complicated. You know, if we're looking at courses that are easy in their name, it's pretty easy. Oh, you know, you took an accounting course, it says accounting, you're good. But sometimes it gets more difficult. In those cases, we do have to ask for a syllabus, course overview, course assignment examples, and spend time to look at that to determine whether or not it fits within one of our categories. We also have a process where if we did not accept a course, they can send us a request to re-review certain courses that they believe should have been counted. So we also go through that. So it is it's labor intensive, and it is true that it is not necessarily 100% consistent in some of those courses that are a little gray, if you will, in whether or not they are business or not business.
Let me follow up then, because earlier I was kind of very interested. You mentioned it's been 20 years with the mobility. At the time, did not ask university because they weren't prepared to provide accounting degrees 20 years ago. Are we working with university to create more specific accounting degrees so that you don't have to have the labor intensive of reviewing courses? That sounds a lot of work for our staff.
So the comment about the 20 years ago was actually from Ms. Saunders on the mobility, and I believe her comment was more focused that they didn't have master's degrees, not accounting degrees, and schools weren't going to be able to necessarily ramp up at a speed necessary to have master's degrees as a kind of standard requirement. So there, as you can see in the list, many states have accounting, or institutions have accounting degrees. Masters of probably more than 20 years ago, but
Ms. Latta.
Thank you, President Rosenbaum. I just wanted to respond to Ms. Corrigan's comment. Yes, thank you for making the distinction that is not required, but I think something I wanted to point out is any CPAs, colleagues that I know that are my age or younger, none of them that I've come across have taken the exam without a review course. So I think in addition to the timing difference of maybe not needing one, this could just be a general shift in the generations and maybe what the academic degrees and programs are providing now that maybe aren't translating fully into being a full preparedness in order to sit for an exam. Just from my personal experience, there's no way I would have passed the CPA exam without a review course. So I just wanted to highlight that perhaps that's maybe just a shift in the industry in addition to the timing at which you choose to sit for the exam.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much. I think this is a very thoughtful framework to address one of the more urgent issues that our profession and our board faces. I will say I do believe that we ought to continue to solicit feedback from all stakeholders, including other boards of accountancy, other national organizations. I think we ought to continue to inquire of faculty and sort of try to hone in and maybe make a little more specific some of the educational requirements that would be proposed within this framework. But I think there'll probably be some comments that will come back from some of the other stakeholders in this as well. But before we make any motion regarding any of these, and particularly regarding your request to direct staff to draft language for statutory implementation of the framework, I'd like to open it up now to public comment. And let me remind those that are on WebEx, as well as those who are here in Sacramento regarding public comment, we're going to limit it to 3 minutes. We're going to start with any of those who are participating here in the San Francisco location. Sorry, what did I say?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. I guess I'm going home. Sorry, in the Sacramento location. And I see right now we have Mr. Jason Fox. You're on the clock.
I will do my best to be as brief as certainly a lot to go through here. But first, just quickly, I want to thank and commend the CBA for having this important conversation and being proactive and bringing all the stakeholders together. You may not know it, but the entire accounting profession across the country and the regulatory stakeholders are all watching you right now. So this is a very unique scenario to have all the different parties at the table talking about some things. I just want to, I'll go through and kind of work backwards on a couple of the different things that were talked about. I appreciate the way the board, staff, and the board has kind of approached some of this, and from an overarching lens of looking at this issue and looking at mobility, substantial equivalency, and possible adjustments to the licensure framework together. I think decoupling a strictly defined licensing framework from the mobility, substantial equivalency gives the profession and the regulatory stakeholders a little bit more breathing room to have more thoughtful conversations on what a pathway to licensure looks like that balances the rigor and consumer protection with streamlined entry into the profession. So I think that's an important kind of concept as you kind of look at some of this stuff. Specific to the SPP, or Structured Professional Program, CalCPA submitted pretty extensive comments to NASBA related to this. While we supported the further exploration of the SPP concept, we did raise a number of questions, comments, concerns, and I'll be honest, we have some serious reservations of how the SPP would work in practice. Some of the comments were logistical in nature. How does the program develop? Who would do what? How is this going to, who's going to pay for what? How is this going to be organized? And, I think Mr. Dustin and Ms. Saunders kind of covered some of those. I know the board raised a lot of those logistical questions as well. Other issues focused on how the program would account for diverse career paths, firm models, candidate accessibility. In particular, we noted, how would a small firm be able to have the systems in place to kind of implement a SPP type of program versus a larger firm? Almost have to have a dedicated person to kind of oversee this, and there's some equity, kind of questions of how that would work. We also echoed some of the concerns raised regarding over-reliance on the exam blueprint to inform the SPP modules used kind of in the program. I think we have a fear and a concern that this could be considered a duplicative barrier that, simply assesses the same content through a different modality. And so I'll quickly go to the California concept of kind of what we've kind of proposed here. I think there's a lot of value in the refined simplification of the modality and refocusing on the core concepts of the 3 E's. I think what the board staff put together makes a lot of sense and kind of worth exploring. And with respect, to the last kind of comment of, we are the largest state, and this board should continue to have conversations. You do regulate the largest population of CPAs. At Cal CPA, we kind of lean into this California exceptionalism. Okay. I'll wrap up here. So I think it's important for this board. You have an opportunity to take a leadership role, and you should take a leadership role from our perspective, and kind of shaping the conversation nationally on what that licensure model looks like. I do think this concept the staff has put together can fit in some of these longer-term perspectives that the AICPA has developed. And so, I'm happy to chat further about that, but I'll be brief with the comments and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. We are going to, do we have any public comment any additional public comment here in Sacramento? If not, could I ask the moderator to open up the lines for those participating in WebEx that would like to comment? I don't know how this is going to work practically. Moderator, do you have the ability to see who is
Yes.
raising their hands and in what order?
Yes,
in that case, I will turn it over to you for public comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So our first request for public comment actually is from Kathy Johnson. And Kathy, you are welcome to unmute yourself, but I'll remind you, you have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. If anyone else would like to make a comment, they can click the hand icon to raise their hand, or they can click the question mark icon in the lower right of your computer screen. It might be behind the 3-dot other options if you're on a mobile device. And that will offer you once you click that question mark, you'll see a text box. Write the word comment and click send. The other option for our call-in users is to press *3 to raise your hand. And as stated, I will give people a 30-second warning before their 3 minutes is up. So Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment to share some more insight to the board members who were asking about efforts of the profession for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Meredith mentioned the partnership with the Alliance of Black Women Accountants. I'm actually a vice president of the Alliance of Black Women Accountants, and I don't want to underestimate that partnership with Cal CPA, who initiated us offering scholarships for 14 of our young ladies to attend Cal CPA's Women's Leadership Forum. There was lots of thankfulness from the participants, from our scholars and their sponsors. They still talk about that. And what, in addition to helping young women of color attend our events, the mentorship, we provide mentorship to anyone who asks for it, who join our organization. One example of that is one of our scholars recently. She just graduated a couple of weeks ago. She's gotten a position with Deloitte. I actually was able to connect her with the partner at Deloitte who's not in the Los Angeles office, and asked that partner if she would be willing to mentor her to help her along the way, help share with her how she can succeed in the profession. Much of that mentorship and camaraderie is going on throughout the profession, and I just wanted to share that information with the board.
Thank you, Kathy. Good to see you. Operator,
And our,
will you please continue?
yes, certainly. Thank you. So our next raised hand or request for comment is from someone logged into WebEx as Stephen Mintz. Stephen, I'll send you a request to unmute your microphone, and I'll let you know when you're unmuted so you can begin. All right, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm happy to address the board today. I was actually on the board committee back in 2010 that established the ethics requirement for accounting students. And we had, among other things, a standalone accounting ethics course. We were quite proud about this because not many states did. It sent a message that we really thought accounting ethics was very important. However, the board has changed the situation by allowing courses other than ethics to count, specifically auditing. When you give students a choice, take auditing or take accounting ethics, or fraud is in there as well, they're going to take auditing because they have to take it anyway. If you don't believe me, Cal Poly, my school, already made accounting ethics from required or an elective, and last week they dropped the entire course. Moreover, the PETH exam is being done away with. And I know that the CPA exam and the CPA evolution may be behind that, but I got to tell you, I went through the initiative. I didn't see the word ethics once. To make matters worse, we know that the big four firms have been found to be guilty of cheating on internal training exams, one of which is ethics. How ironic. And beyond that, in the California Board of Accountancy handbook that students look at on page 4, it indicates that 24 units in accounting have to be taken to meet the 150-hour requirement. And in those 24 units, there is no accounting ethics course choice. So where do we go from here? I urge the board to revisit this whole situation with 10 units of ethics. Do we really need to require a philosophy course, religion, logic? Students are going to take it anyway. Do we really need to require 7 units in business or business ethics? No, they're going to take it anyway in their curriculum. I really think the time has come to simply say 3 units of an accounting ethics course is required, period, end of sentence.
Thank you for your comment. And our next request for comment is from someone logged into WebEx as Joe. And Joe, I'm going to send you a request to unmute. And once you unmute, I'll let you know you can start. All right, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
The moderator just said, my name is Joe Collette. I'm a sole practitioner working in Mountain View. When I graduated from UC Davis with a degree in managerial economics, I wasn't even allowed to sit for the CPA exams because I didn't meet some of the specific unit requirements. And that was like super frustrating to me because I felt it prevented me from, demonstrating my skills and abilities. Even though I had taken several accounting classes at that point, I had taken several finance classes and economics classes. I felt like my background was exactly what a CPA's background should be academically. But these specific unit requirements are so pigeonholed, I don't think they actually reflect what we're looking for. And they just exclude so many people with the skills we want. I ended up not getting my CPA until 5 years later. I ended up working in banking for 5 years. And so I think the specific unit requirements for me and for a lot of people, they are a huge barrier and not a good one. And so I commend this effort to simplify the units requirements. I find a lot of them to be arbitrary. I support, reducing it from 150 to 120. I support reducing the ethics from 10 units to 3 units. I thought my auditing classes did a great job of, addressing a lot of the ethical concerns that CPAs face. And so overall, I just want to commend all these efforts trying to make it more accessible and honestly more rigorous, the process of becoming a CPA. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And we have a question from Angel Nunez. Angel, I'm going to send you a request to unmute so that you can make your comment. There, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you for going over many of the comments about trying to further the profession as a whole. And I'm not sure if this is a topic for this meeting, but this is more so concerning the score release for the CPA exams. I wanted to know if there's any plans to potentially change score releases this year. I feel as though the current score release has made it more difficult for candidates such as myself, especially since I'm not sure if there are any plans to change it. I know that it's subject to change. So that's mainly my main concern. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this point, there are no further requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we've now heard 5 presentations and some public comment. I'd like to open it up for any other discussion that we might want to take, and also then would entertain a motion. Ms. Corrigan.
I have a question for Ms. Centers. If she's able to answer that, we'll try. But I know that there was some discussion with educators as far as, and a lot of work went in, obviously, into putting together this framework. What was the feedback? What were the educators' responses to what we're looking at here? Thank you.
Sure. The responses from the faculty that I spoke to were positive. They said they thought it provided a simplified process. They thought that allowing their students to graduate with a degree in accounting, whatever that might be, allowing them an opportunity to go directly into the workforce instead of having to go back to the community college, which many of them do to get the 150, was a step in the right direction, was a way to address the rising cost that we have with colleges, might be a way to increase diversity within the pipeline. So I'm going to say that I honestly am looking to David. I can't think of anything that we heard that was negative from any of the faculty. Like I said, we did not specifically ask them, what do you think of these specific courses, or what do you think of how we define this degree, recognizing that we wanted to make sure that there was an interest in this framework before we dived into those weedy topics.
Just a follow-up to that, did any of them see this as a potential challenge to their master's programs?
What I heard was it provided options, that there are definitely students who would prefer to go and to get that master's, and that then it would allow that to reduce the years of experience. I heard it more as an as a way for students to pick the right path for them, versus a challenge.
Mr. Jacobson?
Thank you. 2 things. One, I agree with Stephen Minks about the ethics requirement. We perhaps would avoid some of our disciplinary issues if ethics was taught appropriately. 2, there is a misimpression, I believe, amongst the population that accounting is not an exciting profession. You don't see television shows. You see television shows about doctors, about lawyers, about cops. You don't see Joe Smith, the accountant. But Joe Smith, the accountant, is the one who finds the truth. He's he or she, yeah, Joe can be a woman. He or she figures out, often forensically, what the truth is. And I'm not sure how to do this, but somehow to increase the pipeline, there should be something that explains to that excites the population about how exciting it really is that it's the accountant that is the keeper of and the finder of the truth, and allows for all these other things to happen about taking care of business and taking care of problems in business. Thank you.
So just as an offside, you should check on Netflix. Ben Affleck had a movie. It's called The Accountant. I'm not sure if it did very well, but wasn't a very good movie either. But sort of dovetailing on your comments about why we have these pipeline issues, I had a question about, so we received this as the Accounting Talent Solutions Draft Report. Are we discussing this as a group as well? Is there a presentation, or did I just miss it?
We haven't discussed it yet. It's just recently released.
It was just recently released. Okay. So one of the questions I had, maybe a comment, maybe a little bit of both, and it's touched on very briefly in this report. So MIT and UCLA came out with a working paper this year, February, MIT and UCLA put out a working paper that looked at the demand causes for a decline in accountants. And what they found, and something that we've talked about too, is that as corporations have adopted new corporate software, new technology has more or less replaced some of the need for certain types of accounting work. And that they have found significant correlations between lower employment of accountants and stagnating wage growth for accountants in their report. And, one of the things they were looking at is sort of how can we look at how technology can be used to augment the work of accountants versus replacing the need for accountants. So in terms of the coursework that we have here, a lot of it is I think the coursework is what you would expect for someone who is looking to enter the CPA profession. Perhaps we can sort of add more weight to the technology portion of it, and how do we think about what technology courses are required for someone who's working in a modern workplace? Not necessarily bookkeeping, and sure, we have QuickBooks and TurboTax and all of this, but in terms of a larger public accounting firm, the consulting needs that corporations will want necessitates a higher degree of understanding and use of technology. And I don't know if the courses that are currently outlined really directly addresses that issue, which also affects the pipeline issue as well.
Ms. Hines?
Similar to Mr. Jacobson's comments, I think this incentivization for students for individuals to go into accountancy is, what we're talking about. Like, why would someone choose this specialized profession as a career path? Whether directly out of college, directly out of high school and then into college, or as a career change. And there were, what I noted throughout a number of these documents is the infrequency of really direct, specific talk about what it costs to become an accountant, and then what the return on that investment is. Sure, there's a pain point when you come out of college because it's so expensive and, you're in the moment. But some of the reasons that people make commitments to becoming going to other specialized careers, like becoming a doctor or a lawyer, is because it's really widely accepted that those are profitable careers, that they're sustainable, that they're fiscally stable, that once you get that degree, you're going to have a career that is going to provide you with a very with a trajectory of a comfortable lifestyle. And that's particularly important in a place like California, where it is so expensive to live here. And so this is more of a general comment to all of the groups that are looking at how do you increase the pipeline. Be more direct and specific in identifying the value of becoming an accountant. And when you're telling that more compelling story about accountancy, tie it to other specialized professional industries and analogize it to those industries. We do complain about how long it takes to go through law school and that you have to take the bar, but we do it. And while there are discussions about how to, accessibility and maybe streamlining the bar and things like that, at this point, you go to college, you go to law school, you take the bar exam. Similarly with becoming a doctor, similarly with becoming a nurse, we don't question that that's the pathway. And but part of why you don't question is because there's a return on the investment of that time. And I don't think, I have a high school grad student, and I'm, around a number of kiddos of her generation and, a little younger and above. And having been on this board now for a couple of years, I do talk about accountancy as a career path. And some of the, reticence that I get is they don't know a lot of accountants, and they don't know that they're going to be able to make a living. And, so that's real hard feedback that I think when you're talking to younger folks or mid-career folks about this as an option, the guarantees of the career stability is important to articulate to people. So just a more general comment about how to make these discussions more effective and impactful and get more feedback. I also just want to note that, comments from people like me and Mr. Jacobson and Ms. Dong, we're outsiders, as public members. And so I also believe that as you're talking to other stakeholders, we're the consumers too, we're the public as well. And so, making sure that we understand, the accounting industry, and that we really have the tools that we need to be able to go out into the world and communicate that as well, and be advocates, supportive advocates, to think is really helpful. And that's why this conversation was so important, and all of this information. It's a lot to digest, I know, and I look forward to us coming back to it. I'm really excited about the prospect of the research that the AICPA has done, that they're doing with Gen Z and looking at what their motivations are. I look forward to hearing about that, hopefully in our November, meetings and things like that. But I'm really enthused about this conversation, and I think it's really can be very impactful and productive.
Yes, Katrina.
Thank you, President Rosenbaum. So I guess I would just like to throw something out, just a general comment. I'd like to say thank you. We've had amazing presence and support from stakeholders, partners that our board works with. Our staff has done a lot of work to put this together, and this is our process. We have to do everything in this room, right? We have to put it all out here. I think the discussion's been amazing. I think this is a great discussion. I personally have many, many, many questions. We could be here for days. But what I would like to do is to share that I will send some questions to our executive officer to follow up, and hopefully they can be used for follow-up with our presenters today, maybe for staff. But I think that we have a lot of assumptions. I think I'm probably not alone in having questions, because as the conversation develops, I am formulating new things. But what I would like to say is it is important for us to acknowledge our role in being collaborative. I thank Dominic and the team for putting this out there, and want to be supportive of having that collaborative discussion with our stakeholders. I have questions about what's the impact on mobility. There are so many conversations embedded in this
that I do want to be supportive of continuing the conversation, being mindful of the timeline. Is this near term, short term, long term, where it fits? And also, I just lost my thought there, apologies, but look forward to us being able to continue to delve in and be flexible in our conversations going forward. And so thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, in the interest of time, I know we have already gone beyond what is mandated for us to take breaks. But I do want to, and I don't want to stifle conversation, but I think this is something that we'll continue to talk about in meetings going forward. But I would like then to make a motion that we do direct staff to continue the efforts, to continue soliciting feedback. And it would be nice, frankly, if there was feedback that could be done in a more formal way. In other words, name names. We had some conversation that you've heard some feedback, but you don't want to say who it came from. But it'd be nice to solicit feedback from the other stakeholders. So I would direct you, or I would move that we continue this effort, direct additional feedback from other state boards of accountancy, to write letters if that's appropriate to the other national associations. I would also include reaching out to educational institutions in an effort to further refine what our educational requirements might be and how that would fit in with what's existing and what the universities and colleges have planned already. And I would even direct you to go ahead and begin the process of drafting language for a statutory change to implement this framework for consideration at some future board so that we are prepared. So that would be my motion to continue the effort.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Ms. Hines.
I just wanted to I just wanted to ask that in that motion, I'm making the assumption, but I just want to say it out loud, that it covers the items, the questions that were on page 10 on item number 2C5, soliciting feedback, delegating the president to work with staff, like just refer to page 10 to formulate
I was reading from that.
Got it.
So thank you.
I was scrolling through my pages trying to make sure I got it.
I didn't include the framework fact sheet, so maybe I'll amend and put that back in.
It was just off the top of my head.
I love that motion, but can we kind of see it not in a vacuum? Let's define the stakeholder in a wider sense and not just in a vacuum of only the stakeholder of AICPA and Cal CPA and so forth. Make sure you mention universities, so make sure that we include those into the stakeholders.
I mentioned universities as well as all the other state boards of accountancy, as well as all the other national organizations. So I'd like to open it up now for public comment. Do we have any public comment here in Sacramento?
I'll be brief. And first, I think the motion on the table is a good motion and a good path forward for the board to kind of move forward and kind of formalize some of these concepts and allow for people to read and react from. And I just want to underscore a point Ms. Farrell-Hines made is I think when we talk about the pipeline conversation, there is certainly, and I hopefully, from the conversations you heard today, there's a lot the profession needs to do related to bringing people to this profession and making it attractive. But once they've, as Meredith would say, become accounting curious, we need to figure out what that gateway looks like and how that process is streamlined, efficient, and I think that's where this board and this board responsibility is. They all tie together and it blurs together, but I do think you have an important role. And I think the conversation of reimagining this framework, and particularly when you do that in concert with how that fits into substantial equivalence and mobility, is an important part of that. And so I want to underscore the the work you've done and the conversations, there's going to be a lot more work, frankly, and conversations related to this, because this is an issue that's going to continue to move forward in other states, other different concepts. And again, I want to underscore that I think California, you have an opportunity to be a leader in this and be proactive in kind of shaping that narrative, rather than reactive and maybe having to work with a program that doesn't make sense or doesn't work for California and California licensees and consumers. So again, a long-winded way, but I would support the motion that the board has on the table.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Moderator, could you open it up to see if we have any public comment for those participating via WebEx?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And if you are a call-in user, you may press *3 to raise your hand. We do have a request for comment from Cal Poly Pomona's Mejia Ku. Mehu, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone so you can make your comment. And Mehua, did you see the pop-up come up on your screen? And I've resent it. All right, well, this person did put their comment into the text box in full, so shall I read that aloud since we're having issues with the audio?
Yes, please.
Thank you. The comment is, it is great that all related parties are considering flexibility and feasibility for future CPAs. I am happy to see the effort of being more inclusive and flexible of the pathways. I see no further raised hands, although I do see Michael Decker has a hand raised. Michael, I'll unmute. You can unmute yourself, and then I will time you for your 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. There were two comments I just wanted to add to. Number one, the CPA exam has a unique test administration schedule for 2024, largely because it's a new exam, and there's a lot of new content, meaning new multiple choice questions and new task-based simulations, exam questions on the exam that we do not have data for. So it's a necessary evil as a result of launching a new exam that we have to hold scores as we validate that the questions are indeed strong and can be scored and can issue a reliable exam. We're hopeful that we can return to continuous testing for the core sections in 2025. Not sure yet about the discipline sections, but hopefully we can return to continuous next year for core. And as it relates to the return of investment on CPA, just a quick comment. I think the studies have shown that it is a strong career. It offers, extreme stability, and the financial return is there. I think the challenge is today's candidate, today's student, today's graduate is looking for a more immediate return on investment, and the CPA is a longer term return on investment. So without that support of getting through the pipeline and getting through the exam, it becomes that much more financially challenging, as opposed to perhaps the starting salaries of doctors and lawyers and maybe other different professionals. So just something, to take into account. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do not see any further requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Ms. Reed, can you please call for the vote?
Patricia Batchelor?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Nancy Dong?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Christian Lotta?
Yes.
Tony Lynn?
Yes.
Joe Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Teresa Thompson,
Yes.
Yan Tu,
Yes.
and Evangeline Ward.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to take a 10-minute break right now. We will only have a few things remaining on our agenda because some of them we can push forward to the next meeting. So please, 10 minutes and be back in your seats. Thank you.
3:30. Fine.
Okay, we're back in session. We are going to defer several of the items that we have on our agenda today until our next meeting. Specifically, items number 13 and 14 will be deferred until July. Excuse me. We're also going to defer the majority of item 15 until July, with the exception of item 15B3. So at this point, 15B3 is discussion and possible approval of proposed changes to Business and Professions Code, Section 5076, regarding peer review contained in the Sunset Review Report. Ms. Salazar.
Thank you very much for allowing me to give this report. The first item discussed by the Legislative Committee was the proposed changes to Business and Professions Code, Section 5076, regarding peer review, which is the new issue in CBA's Sunset Review Report. So following the submission of that Sunset Review Report, our board received feedback from the American Institute of CPAs, suggesting that additional specificity in the proposed language would be beneficial to require firms to participate in the Facilitated State Board Access, also referred to as FSBA by some. So the Legislative Committee recommends the Board of Accountancy approve the revised proposed language in Business and Professions Code Section 5076 as contained in Attachment 1 for submission to the legislature and possible inclusion in the 2024 Sunset Review legislation to address the peer review issue. This comes to the board as a fully formed motion and does not require a second. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion from any of our board members? Is there any discussion from the public in Sacramento? Mr. Fox.
Jason Fox with California Society of CPAs. I'll just be brief. We made comments during the committee meeting. We're supportive of the change.
Thank you. Moderator, could you please open the WebEx lines to see if we have any public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the motion, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment in the text box and click send. And if you are a calling user, you may press *3 to raise your hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on the motion? I do not see any comments, requests. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
You're
Ms.
welcome.
Reed, could you call for the vote?
Oh, we had a motion, I'm sorry. I have a question. Is it B4A?
B3. B3. It is 15B3 is the item.
Thank you very much. And I feel like I should say this, bingo.
Ms. Reed?
Nancy Dawn,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines, Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Christian Lotta,
Yes.
Tony Lynn,
Yes.
Joe Rosenbaum,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Teresa Thompson.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this time, because we are deferring items 13, 14, and the bulk of item 15 until July, and understanding that there may have been some members of the public that were prepared to comment on those agenda items, I'd like to now open it up for public comment on any of the items 13, 14, or 15. I don't see any public comment in Sacramento. Moderator, would you please open up the lines to see if we have any comments from the WebEx community?
Certainly. If anyone has any comments on the agenda items 13, 14, or 15, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment in the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on the agenda items? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to item number 16, which is our closing business. Agenda item 16A is for agenda items for future California Board of Accountancy meetings. Ms. Hines.
Thank you. I'd like to ask that on a future agenda, we include an overview of the enforcement process and discussion about the standards by which board members consider enforcement obligations.
Thank you. Thank you. And maybe we can include potential ramifications for violations.
Yeah, the entire overview of the enforcement responsibilities of board members and how that process, all the elements of that enforcement process, like a training.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Ms. Lotto.
Ms. Hines, was that with the intention to also include the petition process? I know staff usually prints out a separate packet for that, so I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, our obligations regarding the enforcement and disciplinary oversight of the practice.
Okay, are there any other items for future meetings? Ms. Ward?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry for walking back in late. I'm trying to double, really triple. One more thing I have to go to. I don't know if this is a extra agenda item for next time or something I want to just voice out, but the meeting today was wonderful. All the talk about the pipeline and how we're going to get that going is all wonderful. But I wanted to add in there, I know that you gave the motion to them to continue, but like Ms. Salazar has said, maybe for us to send questions and concerns to feed into that, to have them, when they come back, they can actually address some of those concerns. That way it's not a conversation again, a presentation again, with my same question pending. They have a chance to look up that actual information and give the feedback at that meeting for us. But also to help and assist with reaching out for diversity, to actually maybe ask for some of our assistants that have contacts with different colleges, whatnot, with different programs, associations that are in contact with different minority groups to help improve the applications or help improve more students engage into being a CPA. I do believe it has to happen at a younger age, K through 8. As my profession, we are now reaching out K through 8, not that little, but 8th grade. A lot of middle school presentations I'm starting to do now lately, way more than before, and also address what Ms. Hines had brought up, the fact of, although we have to put it out there, the job is a stable job, a CPA, very stable job, but you have to also put it out there. You have to show these kids, these young ones, numbers. You can't say CPA is great. You have to actually say you make this much money and give an example. My daughter had no idea what she wanted to do because this generation is more of a quick thing. But when I explained to her your lifestyle, how much money you need to make to live your life, you have these career options to choose. And it's not a 2-year program. It takes this many years to get this degree. So I think it's just that simple, more of a seriously that level of this much money you make, and you have to do this many years, and you have to do this, and this is the benefit of it. So I'm sorry, long tangent. But yes, somehow, is it possible that we can actually send in information or questions? That way they can help address it when they talk about this.
Yeah, of course. If any member has any questions that they would like us to be considering as we look at that framework or share with stakeholders, I'm happy to do so.
Ms. Dong?
Could I just put on the agenda perhaps for staff for some information gathering, and it might just be reaching out to EICPA or NASBA in regards to demographics. I think there were a couple of questions that the board members had about first jobs for graduates and which industries they landed in. Well, obviously accounting industry, but are these small firms, mid-sized firms, large accounting firms, government agencies? Do we have any breakdown? That's obviously not something that you can create numbers for in the next 2 months, but I wonder if there's someone somewhere who's done that research. And part of that is also I'm interested in mobility trends too. You know, where in the U.S. at least do we see more people sitting for exams? And it's sort of a counterpoint to what we're seeing in California and, like I said, New York, other, you know, where you would assume that more CPAs would be and where they are actually now. If we can get that sort of population trend too, that would be interesting.
All right, let me open it up for public comment for items for future California Board of Accountancy meetings. Is there any public comment in Sacramento? Seeing none, moderator, could you please open the lines to see if we have any public comment on WebEx?
Certainly. If anyone has a suggestion of a future agenda item, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, type the word comment into the text box and click send, and our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any future agenda items that you would like to suggest? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay, and with that, we are adjourned.